Darren right here, Question Period Canada. We bring you a Saturday broadcast. Should be a week in review, but we've got some fun stuff to watch first. We're just going to kick it off. Maybe we'll get a chance to say hello to everybody. This will be a little bit different than the daytime shows, but we are going to be having a great time. So we're going to jump right into it and start off with some fun videos. Let's get it kicking. It's Saturday night, right? Let's go.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Maybe there's a little grass growing right along here. Some happy little things.
I love you, you love me. We all own our own bodies, so marry who you want and do whatever drugs you choose. And when it's time, you can die with dignity by determining your own end-of-life plan.
Hi, Maria!
Hi, Officer Winkles!
How you doing today?
I don't have to answer that question.
That is correct!
I'm recording you!
Am I being detained?
Nope!
Which I can legally do because I'm in a public place!
Come back if you have a warrant!
Alrighty!
Know your rights!
Yay!
Okay, Gumshoes, Carmen Sandiego is in a country where socialism failed. That narrows it down to Venezuela, Cuba, the former Soviet Union, Moldova, Laos, Vietnam, Albania, Angola.
So we did some digging into your past.
Oh, the suspense is killing me!
But we still haven't solved the case, Holmes. Why is marijuana a Schedule 1 drug?
Elementary, my dear Watson. Nixon and racism.
What?
You okay? I don't know. Hey man, it's alright. It's alright. We've got qualified immunity. Qualified immunity. It's not for you, it's just for me. I shot your dog. I shot your wife. I get to go on with my life.
My favorite part is where the character says, I do not want green eggs and ham. And then Sam I Am says, that's fine. You don't have to eat them. That's your right. The end. It's a short book.
Here we see one of the last taxicab monopolies struggling for life. Competitors have entered their ecosystem.
Do you know what eminent domain abuse is? It's when the government decides the neighborhood of make-believe is better used by a Taiwanese LCD manufacturer.
Today we have a real senator. Hello, Senator.
How are you doing?
What is your favorite color?
I would have to say blue.
Me too. Tell me, why did you sell all your stock right before the crash?
I mean, it's literally just the tragedy of the commons, but they made it cute.
And that sound means we're in international waters. I'm gonna marry a robot and sell my kidney on eBay.
My dearest Rowena, today the district attorney filed criminal charges against a two-door sedan.
Carmen Sandiego is hiding in a country that contains an American military base. Is she in Australia, Bahrain, Belgium, Brazil, Bulgaria, the British Indian Ocean Territory, Cuba, Germany, Djibouti?
Menace.
Circle, square, rectangle, war factory.
All right, Jack, where is your gay wedding cake?
I refuse to bake a gay wedding cake, and you can't force me to. It's my right.
That is your right, but it is my right to kick you off of this show. Please leave.
Yep.
You homophobic bearded meat goblin.
I just want enough to warm it up some. I don't want to set it on fire. It's very easy to set it on fire.
Well, today on This Old House, we're at the city zoning office because they think our new porch is 2 inches too close to the sidewalk, which is f***ing bullshit because their sidewalk is too far away from the street, which they'd know about if they'd read any of the emails I'd sent them over the past 18 months. So join us as we waste our whole f***ing day on this shit.
The premiere of Thomas the High-Speed Rail has been delayed again. And at the 10 Bitcoin level, you receive a handsome tote bag.
Quack! Good one!
Quiet!
Very good!
Queen!
What else starts with the letter Q?
Space lasers.
Oh.
John Podesta and Hillary Clinton had an email exchange about hot dogs.
Where do we get these puppets?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and you have a right to defend your house with firearms. With firearms.
David Menzies for Rebel News here at Trinity
We've got
Bellwoods
more,
Park in
so
downtown
much
Toronto.
more.
And folks, I'm here to report on the City of Toronto introducing new rules for dangerous dogs. And that is indeed the very reason I'm back here at Trinity Bellwoods Park. You see, when it comes to dangerous dogs in the City of Toronto, well, I quite literally have skin in the game. You might recall when cameraman Lincoln J and I visited this park in September of 2020. And if you don't, check out this jarring footage.
Please move. Move. I don't like myself being filmed. You don't have the right to actually smash that camera right now. I wouldn't do that. I have the right to smash that camera. By law, don't do that. By law, I have the right to smash that. You have the right to smash that camera by law? Yeah, by law, you know I have to smash that camera. What law are you quoting?
Brutal. Well, thankfully that tent encampment has finally been dismantled, and I don't see any other dangerous dogs. But speaking of dangerous dogs, so let's talk about what those new rules are for the dangerous dogs in Toronto, of which there are 373 residing in Hogtown. But in any event, here are the new rules. For starters, city staff will soon be on a regular basis visiting owners who have received a dangerous dog order. These dog owners are now required to post a new standardized sign that must be visible on their property, noting the presence of a dangerous dog. As well, dangerous dog owners must have their dogs muzzled whenever they are in public, and the canine's collar must display a dangerous dog tag. Owners are also now required to provide socialization and training for their dogs. And finally, such dogs cannot use off-leash parks. But you know, I think there is one stipulation in terms of these new rules for dangerous dogs that is missing. And it's this. I am of the belief that if you are homeless and you are suffering from addiction issues, you should not be allowed to own a dangerous dog. Now, the individual that had that Mastiff that he sicked on me was homeless. We know he has addiction issues, and yet somehow a known dangerous dog was allowed to be in his possession. And by the way, he was breaking the old rules. And consider this park, Trinity Bellwoods Park, as you can see, a tennis court behind me. You walk a little that way, you'll find a children's playground. So the very idea of a homeless person with addiction issues owning a dangerous dog, I think, is a calamity waiting to happen. Now, I did reach out to the City of Toronto. They provided me with the dangerous dog rules, the new rules, that is, many of which I just read to you. But they haven't given me a concrete answer as to why someone who is both homeless and suffering from addiction issues is still allowed to own a dangerous dog. And indeed, is that where we are right now in our human rights madness? That even if somebody doesn't have a house, and even if somebody is not in the right mind, it is a human right to own a dangerous animal? It is absolutely egregious and outrageous. It is something to be addressed. Look, I'm not coming down on homeless people. If a homeless person with addiction issues wants to own a little pet, a dog or a cat, that means no harm to anyone. I have no problem with that. But the idea that such people can take ownership of essentially a threat to public safety on a 24/7 basis, that is outrageous, and it should be addressed by the City of Toronto. For Rebel News, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies.
We're
Hey,
gonna
folks,
drop in.
as you know, we
on,
love to tell you the
my-
other side of the story here at
We're
Rebel
gonna
News.
drop in with my friend Brent. Say, hey, Brent, what's up?
Canada today. Didn't see Mr. Freeland or Justin Trudeau there.
The opposition.
After 9 years, this prime minister is not worth the drugs, disorder, death, and destruction. In May of 2022, he granted the BC NDP.
So what we're gonna do here is a big review of the week. Like, those were some intro videos, but now we're gonna go through the whole week, like where it started, because like it was a pretty crazy week, right? Like, if you haven't seen it, this is a good place to get caught up. But we saw it, like if you were watching with us live, it was a wild week, and we're gonna have to review it. Take a second peek. Here we go. Let's go. Pierre Poilievre was on fire this week. He tried to make a difference, and I guess Greg Fergus and Trudeau and that Liberal NDP coalition got in the way, maybe, but Pierre Poilievre is on fire this week. Let's take a second look. It is good.
Government's request for a criminal code exemption to allow crack, meth, heroin, and fentanyl use in parks, coffee shops, hospitals, beaches. Overdose deaths since exploded to a record-smashing 2,500 lost lives. The BC NDP government has reversed course and asked the federal government to recriminalize some hard drugs. Why won't this Prime Minister recriminalize these deadly drugs?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we answered the call of the BC government when they requested the exemption on decriminalization of personal possession of certain illicit drugs. Mr. Speaker, what is driving this overdose crisis is the illegal drug supply. Every life lost is a tragedy. I met with Minister Whiteside this past Friday. We are reviewing their exemption request. Mr. Speaker, we have a clear lens on public health and public safety because we have a plan. They do not.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
She's wasting time while people are dying. In the year after this radical Prime Minister granted the decriminalization of crack, heroin, and other hard drugs in parks and hospitals, 2,500 people died. The overdose death in the 9 years of this Prime Minister have tripled to the fastest rising of the 11 countries studied by the Commonwealth Fund. Nurses are afraid to go to work because they have to put up with addicts using meth, crack, and weapons in their hospital room. Even nurses are having to give up on breastfeeding because they're worried their kids will be contaminated with the drugs they breathed in. What the hell are they thinking over there?
The honourable member, as a long-time member of this House, I'll just ask him to withdraw the offensive word because it is not parliamentary.
I withdraw because they're not thinking over there.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, last week we saw the Leader of the Opposition once again encourage supporters of white supremacy, anarchy, and misogyny. This has been a regular occurrence. He draws the admiration of people who dismiss the slaughter of children in our schools. The Leader of the Opposition. Thank you from Hamas.
I'm going to invite the government House Leader to start from the top and to choose his words very carefully so that they do not cause disorder in the House.
Mr. Speaker, last week we saw the Leader of the Opposition once again visit with supporters of white supremacy, anarchy, and misogyny. This has been a regular occurrence. He draws the admiration of people who dismiss the slaughter of children in schools. The Leader of the Opposition now has 30 seconds to speak to this House and to Canadians once I sit down. I ask him to clearly disavow the views of these dangerous people. Will he do that?
That is an
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I unequivocally disavow the guy who spent the first half of his adult life as a practicing racist, dressing up in blackface, support of Hamas, and now he's brought on the extremist and radical position of allowing legal drug use in playgrounds, in hospitals, in coffee shops that has led to the mass death of our people. Will he not refuse the demand of Toronto to replicate the decriminalization nightmare?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sad to say the Leader of the Conservatives, the Opposition, has shown us his true colors.
He has.
He speaks without conviction and clarity on a question that should be very, very, very simple for him to address. His silence speaks volumes. This is not leadership, Mr. Speaker. This is political cowardice.
Yep.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
This government stood by while food prices and rent skyrocketed. This hurts people living with disabilities disproportionately. After making folks wait more than 3 years, they announced a disability benefit that's too little, doesn't cover enough people, and is going to be clawed back by provinces. People struggling to put food on their table have been given crumbs by this government. When will the Prime Minister get serious about helping people living with disabilities?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we are glad to be the first government, the first federal government in Canadian history to put forward the financing for support for people with disabilities across our country. That is a milestone. It is a very big deal. Mr. Speaker, this is just the first step. We recognize there is more to do, including working carefully with provinces and territories, and we're going to do it.
L'honorable député de Burnaby Sud.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
This
I don't mean to break it up like that, but like, good evening, everybody. That seems like the crowd is gathering, so I'm going to try to get some shout outs there really early on. Obviously, Sheila, what's up? Patty, good evening. How are you? There's so many cool people here. Kenzie Kraken, good evening. Good to see you. Domino B, always a pleasure. I'm just reading through the list now. But Crazy Canadian, what's up? Good to see you. This is going to be a fun show, guys. We have a really fun program planned. Drakvich, what's up? Sean T, good evening, sir. Janice, good to see you always. Janice, you've been around now. That's nice. It's good to see you again. I'm not sure if there's anybody else. If I miss anybody else, I'm sorry about that. But we're getting right back.
The government
into
is
the
failing
show.
people living with
We've got so many
disabilities.
videos.
Les groupes luttons.
Advocates for those living with disabilities are clear. The announcement of the disability benefit is just not enough. It's not working. $200, that's not enough. The Prime Minister has thousands, billions even, to give to big oil, but pennies for Canadians living with disabilities. Will he sit down with disability advocate groups and fix this problem? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, our government is proud. We are proud to be the first federal government to come forward with a disability benefit for those living with disabilities. This is a major step forward.
Hello, Alet. I'm sorry. Like, it is hard here. Like, or tricky, not hard, not difficult. Just sometimes you miss names, and that's not ever on purpose. Alet, I'm sorry. Good evening. Welcome to the show. It's good to see you again. It does get tricky. There are a lot of people sometimes. Anyways, back to the show.
And we are proud of our accomplishment. We understand that now we need to work closely with provinces and territories. This is just the beginning. We need to do more, and we will do more. Thank you.
Member from South Surrey, White Rock.
Crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. That's what we have after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government. The extremist policies of this Prime Minister have forced parents in British Columbia to protect their kids from used needles at the playground. Open in-your-face drug use in Tim Hortons, on the SkyTrain, even in our hospitals. The Prime Minister's negligence is killing our citizens. When will he admit that his radical decriminalization experiment has failed and end it?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, too many Canadians are dying every day from an ever-changing illegal toxic drug supply. The opposition leader and members of the Conservative Party are a big talk about investing in treatment, but Conservatives cut 2/3 of the drug treatment fund when they were last in government. Shameful. Let's talk about what saves lives, Mr. Speaker. Safe consumption sites, accessible social and healthcare services, prevention, treatment, and harm reduction. They have no plan, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we continue to work to save lives.
The Honourable Member from South Surrey, White Rock.
Well, let's talk through a clear lens, Mr. Speaker. 40,000. That is the number of Canadians that have died from drug overdoses since 2015. Entirely preventable. Last year, BC set a record with over 2,500, and they want to talk about saving lives and compassion. Premier Eby and this Prime Minister have failed British Columbians, and now he's taking his deadly experiment to Toronto. Until this extremist drug policy is dismantled, people will keep dying. Will he prioritize recovery and stop killing Canadians with his radical ideology?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition don't want to talk about the plans or the tools that are needed to save lives because they don't have a plan. All they offer Canadians are slogans and fear. Slogans are not an evidence-based strategy, Mr. Speaker. They are just words. We have a full suite of measures that address this crisis because it's a public health crisis, Mr. Speaker. It is not a criminal issue. We continue to work with BC on the exemption that they requested with a clear lens of public health and public safety.
Good job, yeah.
The Honourable Member from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
Mr. Speaker, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. After 9 years of the Prime Minister's extremist policies, public drug use has become the norm. The Prime Minister has made it legal in British Columbia to smoke meth on the beach beside a family or smoke crack in a hospital beside healthcare workers. In fact, a nurse in British Columbia stopped breastfeeding her twin girls early at 13 months because being exposed to illicit drugs in the hallway. When will the NDP Liberals realize that time is up and end the decriminalization today?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, every life lost in the illegal toxic drug supply, every overdose, every family that loses a loved one is a tragedy. Mr. Speaker, our focus, working with the BC government on their exemption request, is about saving lives, about providing health care. Harm reduction is health care, Mr. Speaker. Treatment is health care, Mr. Speaker. Prevention is health care, Mr. Speaker. Enforcement is also part of the plan. We continue to work with law enforcement in the provinces. They continue to divide.
I'm going to ask the member from Northern Rockies to please make sure that he only takes a microphone when he is recognized. The honourable member from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake. Zimmer.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Drug deaths are up 380% in BC since 2015 when they took office. So the NDP Liberal Coalition unleashed a horrific experiment in British Columbia, and now the NDP Premier is pleading with the Prime Minister to fix this disaster. But what we're learning is the Toronto Minister has decided they're going to double down and they want to expand this failed project into Toronto. After 9 years, this NDP Liberal government's drug policy is failing Canadians, and the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Instead of expanding this, will they do the right thing and just end this policy today?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Speaker, around the world, opioid deaths are taking so many lives. The only way we can rise and meet that moment is with truth and evidence, and not inflaming through spreading false information this situation. I would ask the member opposite, instead of trying to seek opportunity to attack in this House, to work collaboratively on evidence-based solutions that save lives. Like her, like every member of the House, when a life is lost, it rips us all apart, and we have to meet it with truth and honesty and set aside partisanship, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, overdose is the leading cause of death in my province of British Columbia. This NDP Liberal Prime Minister's extremist drug policies have turned our neighbourhoods into war zones. Hard drugs are being used in playgrounds, coffee shops, and even hospitals. Last week, a drug-addled man lit fires and consumed drugs in front of traumatized kids at the Prince George Aquatic Centre. The RCMP were called numerous times, but their hands are tied because of their insane drug policies. Will the Prime Minister end his deadly drug decriminalization today?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask clearly, what evidence are they basing their decisions on? And the answer to that question,
the Honourable Minister has 25 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, replacing science with slogans, replacing research and evidence with talking points will not fix this problem, Mr. Speaker. There is not a person in this House who is not ripped apart when we watch somebody lose a loved one to this crisis. But to meet it with partisanship, to meet it with pretend solutions, to do things that have failed in other jurisdictions is a disgrace to those who have lost family members, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Cumberland Colchester.
Speaker, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs and disorder. After 9 years, this Prime Minister's extremist policy allowing for deadly hard drugs to be used in public spaces such as parks, coffee shops, beaches and hospitals. A leaked memo in BC is now instructing nurses to teach patients how to inject illegal drugs into their intravenous. Jeez. Will the Prime Minister end his deadly drug decriminalization experiment today?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Addictions and Health.
Speaker, on this side of the House, we are committed to saving lives and making sure people who use drugs don't die alone. We moved forward with a decriminalization pilot project at BC's request and have always maintained it would be rigorously monitored and adjusted as needed. We know a full suite of tools, including harm reduction, are needed. Even the MP from Caribou Prince George knows it. He said himself, quote, "I asked if safe injection sites were helping. They did say that safe injection sites probably do help." Mr. Speaker, every tool, every resource to save lives is what we are committed to.
After 9 years of this Prime Minister, Canadians are skipping meals and food banks are overwhelmed. 83% of Canadians are paying $80 more a month for food than they were just 6 months ago. According to Second Harvest, more than half of the food banks in the Toronto area can't meet demand, and they're putting families on wait lists. Families can't afford to put food on the table, and the crisis is getting worse when the Liberal NDP government increases the carbon tax 23%. Will the Prime Minister reverse his decision to increase the carbon tax, pass 234 in its original form, so Canadians don't have to dumpster dive for their dinner?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
As the member well knows, Bill C-234 is in the hands of the Conservative House Leader. The member should speak to him.
The Honourable Member for Foothills.
This NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost of food. While Canadians are skipping meal, the ministers who are in charge of lowering food costs for Canadians is rubbing shoulders with Hollywood celebrities and political elites at the most expensive dinner imaginable. He's dining out at the White House on the taxpayer dime. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, he's out to lunch and the ministers are out of touch. Will the Champagne Coalition and Caviar Caucus lower food costs for Canadians and pass 234 in its original form?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Good. Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago, we presented our budget to deliver fairness for every generation. Because right now, a nurse or a carpenter can pay taxes at a higher marginal rate than a multimillionaire. That's not fair, and we're changing it. But, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have said that they are opposed to our budget. And that is because the only thing they know how to do is cut, austerity, and quietly to keep on delivering tax breaks to their rich friends.
The Honourable Member from Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Food banks in Canada are being pushed to the brink with high demand and donations not keeping pace. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, that was this morning's headline. Canadian families cannot afford to buy food, and our farmers who grow food face punishment, not progress. No farms means no food. From high cost to empty store shelves, this Prime Minister and his costly carbon tax are not worth the cost. So will the Prime Minister finally axe the carbon tax so our farm families can stay in business and Canadian families aren't forced to use food banks?
Good question. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government believes in fairness for every generation, especially younger Canadians. That's why we are investing in building more homes faster. We're investing in making life more affordable with programs like early learning and child care and dental care. And we're investing in jobs and growth. And we're paying for it by asking those at the top to contribute a little bit more. But the Conservatives are opposed to our plan. The only thing they believe in is austerity and quietly giving tax breaks to their rich friends.
The Honourable Member from London, Fanshawe.
Last
Last week, the Maple revealed the Canadian government is hosting test sessions with an Israeli company, Smart Shooter, whose technology is used to kill Palestinian children. They're even eligible for a prize. Its CEO boasted that this war is good for business. As Palestinians continue to be killed, Canada's support of this company is inhumane and shows a shocking lack of judgment. Why is this government showcasing weapons in Canada that are killing kids?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, and I would simply remind the member opposite that Canada has one of the most rigorous military export regimes in the world, and we are vigilant in ensuring that all military technology being shared with any other foreign country is rigorously meets the standards that have been set for us.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton, Strathcona.
A rigorous regime. Israeli arms are being tested in Canada, in Alberta. Canadians do not want to be complicit in Netanyahu's crimes against Palestinian children. Canada should not be buying from these companies and should not be selling to the Israeli government. The minister promised this House to issue a notice to exporters on March 18th, 6 weeks ago. Where is the notice to exporters, and when will Canada finally impose a two-way arms embargo?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our position when it comes to arms export permits is well known, absolutely clear. Now, when it comes to what is happening in the Middle East, we've been clear. The violence must stop. We need a ceasefire now. Hostages must be released, and we need to make sure that humanitarian aid gets into Gaza. And at the end of the day, what we need is a two-state solution where the state of Israel can live side by side in peace and security with a Palestinian state. I've been in contact with my US, UK, and many Arab countries counterpart over the weekend, working hard on bringing back peace to the Middle East. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
NDP Liberals are spending $52 billion of taxpayer money to subsidize international auto companies. Then the Building and Trades Union recently condemned the use of foreign replacement workers at the Stellantis plants. Jobs like forklift driver. Yet contrary to the Liberal claims, foreign replacement workers keep being brought in for jobs that don't require specialty knowledge. The union calls that a slap in the face, and we agree. Yep. After 9 years, the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. So how much will Canadian taxpayers pay to employ foreign replacement workers?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, instead of spreading disinformation, Mr. Speaker, this member should be standing with all Canadians in this House and making sure that we maximize jobs for Canadians. That's exactly what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. The investment that he's talking about is going to create more than 2,500 direct jobs at this plant, Mr. Speaker. That's going to be one of the largest battery assembly plant in North America, Mr. Speaker. We should all be proud that Canada now ranks first in the world for the battery ecosystem we've built, Mr. Speaker. This is according to Bloomberg. We're going to keep investing in Canadians. We're going to keep investing in jobs, and we're going to keep investing in the auto industry.
The Honourable Member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
This Liberal minister is spreading disinformation because in committee he admitted he hadn't read the contracts. But I've read both, Stellantis and VW. And do you know what's not in them? Any requirement that jobs at these plants be Canadians only. Canadians don't believe this Prime Minister, and since I've read the contracts, I don't either. The NDP Liberals are hiding the truth. If this Prime Minister has contractual job guarantees, he will have no problem proving me wrong.
That's right.
Will the Liberals release the contracts, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, it's amazing that the member would be against creating jobs in this country, Mr. Speaker, and maximizing jobs. If you read the contract, I guess you should have a lawyer to understand the terms, Mr. Speaker, because it's very simple. The terms are maximizing Canadian jobs, but it gives me an opportunity, Mr. Speaker. We should rejoice. Just last week, we announced and we supported the largest investment in the auto sector in Canada's history. Honda is going to be investing $15.7 billion, Mr. Speaker, in this country. Mr. Speaker, we're attracting record investment. We're going to create jobs, and we're going to fight for every Canadian jobs.
The honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, this government's policies have been focused on promoting diversity, respect, and equality amongst all Canadians. On that side of the House, however, we learned last week that the Leader of the Opposition visited an encampment set up by individuals linked to extreme far-right groups like Diagolon. CSIS says Diagolon encourages and inspires serious violence, yet the Conservative leader is refusing to denounce them or apologize for engaging with them. Can the government please reiterate how we will keep Canadians safe from extreme groups and what our responsibilities are as political leaders?
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, while we can appreciate different views and political opinions, what we cannot and should not tolerate is any member of this House indulging in and actively courting extremist far-right groups that espouse anti-Semitic, anti-2S LGBTQI+, and white nationalist ideologies. The Conservative leader's embrace of, and quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, refusal to denounce Diagolon in this very...
Colleagues, I'm having great difficulty trying to hear the answer from the Honourable Minister. I'm going to ask members to please let the Minister finish his statement. The Minister has 20 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader's embrace of and refusal to denounce Diagolon is incredibly alarming. That he will do anything to win speaks volumes to his values, and Mr. Speaker, quite frankly, is sending chills across this country. On this side, we will always defend Canadians and Canadian values.
The honourable member from Kenora.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, young Canadians know that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. 8 in 10 people now regard home ownership as being only for the rich, as they've completely given up on their dream of ever owning a home. So simply, Mr. Speaker, will this government finally listen to Canadians and to our common sense plan to cap spending that brings down inflation and interest rates so that young people can finally afford a home?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I'll agree insofar as the Conservatives believe that it's essential that we do more to make sure that young people can get into the housing market. But the difference between our side and theirs is they do not have a plan to achieve that reality. Mr. Speaker, the measures that they are putting forward include measures that would raise taxes on home buildings, make it more difficult to build homes in communities, and actually cut funding for homes, for programs that are supporting home building today. We have new measures that create tax-free opportunities for young people to save up for a down payment, new measures that help young people establish a credit score, and new measures that reduce their monthly mortgage costs. We will do what it takes to solve the housing crisis. I wish they'd join us.
The honourable member from Fundy Royal.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, car theft in Canada is completely out of control. 2 in 5 Canadians have either had their car stolen or know someone who has. Last week in Victoria, a repeat offender was arrested 3 times in 3 days for stealing cars. The police in Victoria had to put out a statement, and they laid the blame for this on the Liberals' failed Bill C-75. Will this Justice Minister listen to the police and reverse their soft on crime Bill C-75?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I've got a lot of respect for that member. He's my critic. He served on the Justice Committee with me for a number of years. What I don't have respect for is the instructions he gets from his leader on how to vote. When we have legislation in the chamber that deals with, in the fall economic statement, tackling the money laundering and the organized crime links to auto theft, he's instructed to vote against. Before even reading the document that is the budget 2024 and what it contains with respect to addressing auto theft, increasing maximum penalties, dealing with the link between using youth and organized criminality, and tackling more money laundering, he was told to vote against yet again by his leader.
The honourable member from Fundy Royal.
Mr. Speaker, the Justice Minister's own vehicle was stolen 3 times in the last 3 years. The Liberals bills are not fixing the problem. Conservatives have a private member's bill in the House right now that establishes serious jail time for repeat car thefts. Mr. Speaker, this individual in Victoria was arrested 3 times in 3 days. He pushed a woman out of her car to steal her vehicle. He drove off and caused a collision. It's time in Canada that we crack down on repeat violent auto theft. Conservatives will do it.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, that member knows that repeat violent offenders are already dealt with by our bail regime. He voted in favour of that. He should also know that when C-75, the very bill
I'm going to ask members, please, to allow the minister to listen to his question. I'll ask you to settle down. The Honourable Minister from the top.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That member knows and should know that on the bail reform bill that he actually voted in favor of, it tackles serious violent repeat offenders, which would include those who use serious violence in committing an auto theft. What he should also realize is that the very bill he impugns, Bill C-75, when that was before this chamber in the 42nd Parliament, we promoted an augmentation, an increasing in the penalty that is available for auto theft. He and all of his colleagues voted against. What I would prefer is some collaboration and a bit less hypocrisy.
The Honourable Member from Halifax West.
Mr. Speaker, our government is making historic efforts to solve Canada's housing crisis. Not only do we need to build more homes, we need to build them faster, and Canada must change the way we build those homes. Can the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities tell this House and Canadians the new measures introduced to solve Canada's housing crisis?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
I thank the Honourable Member for her question and for her advocacy for housing supports, particularly for the most vulnerable across the City of Halifax. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to share that we have put forward a plan to solve Canada's national housing crisis. It includes new measures that will help make it easier to build more homes by reducing the costs, eliminating the barriers, including freeing up more public land. It includes more measures to help young people save up for a down payment and to reduce their mortgage costs. And it also includes measures to support those who cannot afford to have a roof over their head, including a recent investment of $11 million to build more housing for persons with disabilities and seniors. We're going to continue to make the investments to solve Canada's housing crisis.
The Honourable Member from Courtenay, Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, last week the BC police chiefs told us it is deadly street drugs laced with fentanyl that is killing thousands, not the diversion of safer supply. They clearly advise that preventing people from using drugs in public and preventing toxic drug deaths requires more, not fewer safe consumption sites. BC has listened to the police call for more tools to deal with the public use of illicit substances. When will the Liberals ignore Conservative disinformation, recall the expert task force, and formulate a comprehensive plan to end the toxic drug crisis? When?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for being a collaborative partner in addressing the toxic drug supply and the tragic overdose deaths that are taking over this country from day to day. We're committed to a comprehensive, collaborative, and evidence-based substance policy approach. We appreciate the excellent work of the expert task force on substance use, whose mandate was to provide advice to the government on a renewed Canadian drugs and substance plan. It's important that the actions be informed by independent advice of experts and evidence. I've asked the department to re-establish an expert advisory committee, and work is underway.
The Honourable Member from Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians want to know how a deportation order, one upheld by a federal court, of a person convicted of 5 criminal charges and who didn't like to attend much school despite being in Canada on a student visa, somehow still managed to get ministerial intervention to stop his removal. Did the Minister of Immigration intend to make a mockery of our legal and immigration systems? Or was this intervention guided by the hope of getting a few more votes for his party in BC?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
As the member well knows, these are not matters that we talk about publicly, much less on the floor of the House of Commons. Thank you.
Mark Miller. No answer.
Colleagues, following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, I understand there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of Jean-Pierre Ferland. À la suite des discussions entre les
Following discussions among representatives of all parties in the
Minister is not worth the drugs and death. His extreme and radical drug policy has increased overdose deaths in British Columbia by 380%. In the year following his decriminalization of crack, heroin, and other hard drugs in hospitals, transit buses, coffee shops, and parks where children play, there has been a record-smashing 2,500 deaths. Will the Prime Minister accept the BC NDP's demand to recriminalize those drugs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I just answered that question. What hasn't been answered by the Leader of the Opposition is why he chooses to continue to court extreme right nationalist groups like Diagolon. He refuses to denounce these extremists who don't believe Canadians should coexist with each other. Instead, they call for war and tell people to follow their instincts accordingly. The Leader of the Conservative Party is actively courting the support of groups with white nationalist views. It is disturbing, and he needs to stand up and apologize now.
Right now.
Colleagues, so soon in question period, it is important that we try to control ourselves. I'll ask the honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton, please, to allow members to ask the questions and members to respond. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I always condemn extremism and racism, including from the guy who spent the first half of his adult life as a practicing racist, dressing up in hideous racist costumes so many times he can't remember.
The honourable member, Leader of the Opposition, knows that to make an accusation directly at the character of a single person is not appropriate. And I'm going to ask all members to control themselves. I'll ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to rephrase this question and to start from the top.
Mr. Speaker, I will also condemn the extremism of a Prime Minister who gives hundreds of thousands of dollars of anti-racism money to a Jew hater who has proposed shooting Jews in the head. I condemn a Prime Minister who allows the IRGC, which murdered 55 Canadians, to remain legal. And I condemn a Prime Minister who allows open use of crack, heroin, meth, and weapons in hospital rooms that threaten nurses and on school buses next to children. Will the Prime Minister reverse his extremist policies and the death
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader opposite is showing us exactly what shameful, spineless leadership looks like. He shakes hands with white nationalists and then goes to actively court the support of those members and has the nerve. Get it together, Greg!
Any idea what you're doing?
Order. I'm going to ask the honourable member from Lethbridge if she has problems with the chair, that she should challenge the chair in a way. But as she knows, as the honourable member from Lethbridge knows, that by challenging the chair is against the rules of this House. I'll ask the honourable member to please to ask her to withdraw her remarks.
The chair is acting in a disgraceful manner.
I'm going to ask you, will you...
Greg Fergus leaves it for so long.
Ms. Harder, I have to name you for disregarding the authority of the chair. Pursuant to authority granted to me by Standing Order 11, I order you to withdraw from the House and from any participation by video conference for the remainder of this day's sitting. Now back to the issue at hand. Mrs. Thomas, my apologies. Now back to the original point. I'm going to ask the Prime Minister to please, as I'd ask the Leader of the Opposition, to start from again and to make sure that he does, to start his question, and to reframe it in a way that does not call into the character of an individual member of Parliament. The Honourable Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader opposite is showing us once again what he will do to try and earn votes through personal attacks. He shakes the hands of a leader of a white nationalist group, then goes to actively court the support of the group's members and thinks he can get away with it. This is a group that advocates for violence against 2S LGBTQI+ Canadians, against Hindus and Sikhs, against Muslims and Jews. Diagolon stands against everything we stand for as Canadians, and yet he will not denounce them or what they stand for. That is shameful, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that, like everything else he says, is false. He uses fear and falsehood and this latest distraction because he doesn't want to face the fact that he has become so extreme and radical that even the BC NDP is distancing themselves from his decriminalization of crack, heroin, meth, and other hard drugs in hospital rooms, causing nurses to have to stop breastfeeding their babies for fear that their contaminated air might end up in the breast milk of the baby. Why won't he ban these drugs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We still won't condemn these groups. Any leader that needs the support of a far-right white nationalist group to fundraise and get closer to power does not deserve elected office. This is a 19-year career politician who knows exactly what he's doing and thinks he can get away with it. It was a choice to pander to white nationalists, not an accident, and it is a choice to continue to not condemn them and condemn everything they stand for in his quest for votes.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Member for the second time from St. Albert, Edmonton, to please withhold his comments until he has the floor. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it is a choice for him to implement extremist policies that have taken the lives of 2,500 British Columbians every single year. Since the NDP has asked him to reverse course on his and formerly their radical policy, 22 British Columbians have died of drug overdoses. But he continues to allow those drugs to kill the people in our hospitals and on our public transit. When will we put an end to this WACKO policy by this WACKO Prime Minister?
No. That is not there are a couple.
So no. Like, my cat thinks I'm talking to her right now, but like, that's Greg Fergus talking to. He's panicking. it's so funny. Like, this is just the beginning of the week. Really, this is about 5 minutes into Tuesday's show. Yeah, it slows down after Tuesday afternoon, but it heats up again Thursday. Anyway, back into it, sort of interrupt. We are having fun here tonight watching this again, because Greg Fergus right there, he was panicking. No. It sounds like a dork. He is a dork.
The things which are going on here today, which is not acceptable. And I ask all members, please, to keep themselves, to control themselves. I'm going to ask two things. One, I'm going to ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to withdraw that term, which is not considered parliamentary.
Mr. Speaker, I replace WACKO with extremist. He is an
The Honourable Member to please. I'm going to ask the Leader of the Opposition once again to just withdraw that comment, please. And I'll invite the Honourable Member. I'm going to ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to please withdraw that comment and simply withdraw that comment.
I'll replace it with radical Baptist policy.
I am not asking to replace. I'm asking the Honourable Member to just simply withdraw.
Mr. Speaker, I replace the word WACKO with extremist.
It didn't pause. That's just like Greg Fergus doing what he does. He pressed his button. He likes playing with his own little button, I guess. They'll be back, like here. Some audio. This guy is a clown.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition one last time to please withdraw that comment and simply withdraw that comment.
I simply withdraw and replace with the aforementioned adjective.
Mr. Poilievre, I have to name you for disregarding the authority of the chair. Pursuant to the authority granted to me by Standing Order 11, I order you to withdraw from the House and from any participation by video conference for the remainder of this day's sitting.
He does the button trick again. Like, doesn't he understand? Like, on Saturday night, we're going to be trying to watch this in a replay, and he's making it boring. Greg Fergus sucks, guys. He's an issue. Look at him up there. He's just being stunned. Look. What do you think he's thinking about? He'll twiddle his thumbs here. You'll see that probably. I've seen this video a couple of times. Yeah, just a weird, very weird man. There it is, the thumb twiddle. Like, because he doesn't know. He's waiting for someone, this clerk, to give him a decision. The rest of the week is chaos after this. Like, he hit his button
The second
again.
matter which
That
I was
helps.
going to bring up was the fact that I was hearing some catcalling from the far end of the House. I wasn't able to identify the person, but I'll ask all members to carry themselves in a way that is dignified for this House. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Losing.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition wants to talk about extremism. Well, a week ago, he visited a Diagolon encampment. Diagolon hates that minorities in this country get the same protections as everyone else, and they are charter-protected rights. Just yesterday, a week after the Conservative leader sat down with
I'll ask the honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes to please withdraw, to please only take the microphone when he is afforded the opportunity to ask a question. I'll ask the Right Honourable Prime Minister to continue. I'm going to ask the Right Honourable Prime Minister to finish his question. He has 15 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, the association of the Leader of the Opposition with Diagolon and their disdain for charter-protected rights brought them to just yesterday, a week after he sat down with Diagolon members, he gave a speech pledging to overturn the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the rights of Canadians and our justice system. That's dangerous.
For us.
Speaker, Canadians deserve to retire with dignity, and they can with the world-renowned Canada Pension Plan. But Danielle Smith is trying to pull Alberta out of the CPP, and the Conservative leader has spent his entire career attacking workers' pensions while he benefits from a public pension himself. New Democrats are fighting back. Today I tabled a bill that will protect the CPP from Conservatives and give Canadians and Albertans a say in the future of their CPP. Will the Liberals support my bill, or will they stand with the cut-and-gut Conservatives?
Hear, hear.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're pleased to see the NDP joining us in the fight to protect the Canada Pension Plan. Actually, one of the very first things we did in government about 6 months in was strengthen the Canada Pension Plan for future generations. We will continue to stand against Conservatives who for decades have been railing against the Canada Pension Plan, and indeed the plan by Alberta to dismantle the Canada Pension Plan, to put at risk the pensions of millions of Albertan seniors, is absolutely irresponsible, and we will continue to stand in defence of the Canada Pension Plan and look forward to standing with all members in this House in doing just that.
Hear, hear.
Priority processing for the Lifeboat scheme for Hong Kongers has gone from 6 months to 21. Processing delays for the PR application means their work permit and study permit are going to expire. The medical coverage will end. Dependent children will no longer be able to access education. Hong Kongers will be sent back to face an escalation of arbitrary detentions and arrests because of the draconian Safeguarding National Security Bill. Will the minister resume the 6-month priority processing average for Hong Kongers and automatically renew their work and study permit as they wait?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Mr. Speaker, we continue to stand with the people of Hong Kong. We will work on processing times. We continue to work with people who seek refuge in Canada, and will continue to do so. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Timmins, James Bay.
For decades, people in James Bay have struggled to overcome systemically racist underfunding of health services. Every region deserves proper hospital services, and we're finally on the verge of having a proper hospital built in the Winnebago Health region. But now at the 11th hour, the Liberals have walked away. I mean, heck, even Doug Ford is bringing the province to the table. So will the minister explain why she made the health authority jump through so many hoops only to tell them that the Liberals had no intention of funding this badly needed project?
First of all, let me...
Just 1 minute. I'd like to just apologize to the member from Timmins, James Bay. I might have reduced the time of his question. We got the timing wrong here on the clock. I just want to make sure if the honourable member can please start again and start his question from the top, just to make sure that he has his full question. The honourable member from Timmins, James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For decades, people in James Bay have struggled to overcome systemically racist underfunding of health services. Every region deserves a proper hospital, and we're finally on the verge of having a proper hospital built in the Winnebago Health region. But now at the 11th hour, the Liberals have walked away. I mean, heck, even Doug Ford is bringing the province to the table. So will the minister explain why she made the health authority jump through so many hoops only to tell them that the Liberals have no intention of funding this badly needed project?
The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations.
And let me reassure him that I spoke with Grand Chief Fiddler just last week about this very project. We're working with the province and with the region to make sure that everyone can access quality health care no matter where they live.
From Kingston and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, disinformation, extremism, and violent hate are on the rise around the world, including here at home. Standing up to far-right extremism is something that I know this government takes very seriously. But it is shameful that the Leader of the Opposition entertained and posed for photos with organizations our national security agencies call a far-right extreme group rooted in white nationalism that promote hate and violence. Can the government please tell this House how important it is that these far-right extreme groups be condemned and addressed for the real threat that they are?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Diversity.
Mr. Speaker, while we're investing $273 million towards Canada's first ever action plan on combating hate in this budget, the Leader of the official opposition is encouraging hate as he cozies up to far-right white extremist supporters.
The Speaker has made rulings about this in terms of lending intentions to honourable members in this House. So I'll ask the Honourable Minister to,
Diane, thank you so much. That stuff's not necessary. Thank you so much. I don't know what to say every time somebody does something like that. I don't know. Thank you. Appreciate it. It's still weird. It's new. Thank you. Awesome.
About 24 seconds left on the clock to please correct her statement in a way that is respectful of all members.
Mr. Speaker, as a government, we have been very deliberate about choices to be inclusive, while the Leader of the Opposition is making it a very deliberate choice in courting to far-right extremists. This is, Mr. Speaker, extremely reckless, it's dangerous, and he owes Canadians an apology, and he needs to denounce the closing up that he's doing with these groups.
And I have the honourable member from Scarborough Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, April is Cancer Awareness Month. Though the month is ending, the need for cancer awareness and education continues. According to the Canadian Cancer Society, 2 out of 5 Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. In 2023 alone, an estimated 239,000 Canadians were newly diagnosed with cancer. Can the Minister of Health update this House on what our government is doing to support Canadians impacted by cancer?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member for Scarborough Agincourt for her continued advocacy. She knows all too well, as do I and every member of this House, that so few of us get to make it through this life and not be touched by cancer, and that it is an imperative that we do all that we can. And I want to take a moment to recognize the Canadian Cancer Society, Breast Cancer Canada, and all those that work tirelessly to advocate. We put $1 billion over the last 5 years to work through breakthroughs in science and to improve how we prevent and treat cancer. We're taking critical action in prevention. Together, we can see an end to cancer, and I thank that for the time to speak, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cowichan and Malahat Langford.
Mr. Speaker, the community of Port Renfrew in my riding relies on recreational fishing as the major economic driver in the region, bringing in an estimated $26 million per season. But the Liberals plan to end that important economic pathway and are failing to provide credible data to justify the fishing closures. This move will harm the local economy and devastate the local community, including the Pacheedaht First Nation. This is shameful. Why are the Liberals putting Port Renfrew's economy at risk with these ill-informed and punitive fishing closures?
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member opposite. It was just a couple of weeks ago I was in BC talking to a lot of First Nations communities on a whole host of topics that are important to them and important to their communities. I know this one is equally important in terms of recreational fishing from a food and ceremonial perspective, cultural perspective, and an economic perspective. And I will set some time aside to discuss the item with the member opposite very soon. Thank you.
Good job, Mike. Good job, Mike.
The honourable member from Churchill, Kiwatanuk, Aski.
Mr. Speaker, today was the final day for most Canadians to file their taxes, and thanks to NDP pressure, the wealthy will be paying somewhat more. Unlike the Conservative leader who, while in government, gave $60 billion to corporations, New Democrats would rather fund key public services like dental and pharmacare. As usual, the Liberals continue to ignore the need for serious tax fairness at a time of rampant corporate greed. We still use a system where wealthy corporations can get out of paying $30 billion in taxes in 1 year. Does this government have an idea how much money the wealthiest Canadians will deprive Canada of this year?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for the question. This budget is about fairness for every generation. It is about making the essential investments in housing, in affordability, in economic growth. And we agree with the idea behind the question that the way to finance those investments is to ask those who are doing the best in our society to contribute a little bit more. That's why in the budget we are proposing to increase the capital gains inclusion rate. We hope all members will support that.
Colleagues, this brings to the end of the questions which are, please listen carefully. This brings to the end of the questions which were indicated by the various whips in the House. Now we have question period which will continue on for another 5 minutes, and so we're going to other members who will rise, keeping all proportion.
Honourable member for Durham.
Sorry, guys, I forgot to mention, like, in the middle, I've got this sweet sandwich. I don't know how else to describe it. This is Jamil Javani. He's new to the House. Gives me a little bit of hope, like, to see what might come for the politics at all. Even just, like, to get kids interested in politics, it's going to take a guy like this. He's handsome, he's young, he's smart. He's been through a lot. Let's take a peek.
We believe that Canadians deserve better.
Honourable member for Durham.
Madam Speaker, I rise in the chamber today as Canada's newest Member of Parliament, elected to represent the riding of Durham. And I have a very clear message to deliver on behalf of my community in Durham. We are tired of the Prime Minister's broken promises. We are tired of the Prime Minister promising to fix this and fix that, and in return what we receive is a life that is harder and more expensive. Madam Speaker, we believe that Canadians deserve better. And we believe that the topic of debate today, pharmacare, is just the latest example of the Prime Minister promising big things only to disappoint the people of Canada. Now, I put my name on a ballot, and I wanted this job as Member of Parliament because despite the Prime Minister's best efforts, I am optimistic and hopeful about the future of this country. I believe that once we have a new leader in this great land, we will see brighter days ahead. And my optimism does not come from these big deficits or these big budget announcements. My optimism comes from my knowledge of the people of Canada and the people of Durham. My optimism comes from people like Kirk Kemp, who runs one of the biggest and most important agricultural businesses in Canada, Algoma Orchards. And as he becomes more successful in his business, he only gives back more to our community, supporting initiatives like the Bowmanville Hospital redevelopment. My optimism comes from people like Dr. Khan Chandra, a dentist in Curtis, Ontario, who has built a tremendous business, provides for his family, and gives back to our community as a connector for Durham's growing Tamil community. And my optimism comes from Kim and Leon Morrow over on Taunton Road East in Oshawa, who scrape together every spare dollar they can find and every spare moment to provide guidance and mentorship to young men and women who may otherwise fall into the pitfalls that await struggling youth. But Kim and Leon have their backs, and that is why I'm hopeful about the future of this country. You see, Madam Speaker, I'm very honored to stand here in this beautiful building, and I appreciate the chance to dress up in a suit and a tie. But my heart was not shaped in places like this. My heart was shaped by people like my grandfather, Robert McFarland, rest in peace. My grandfather, who worked as a school custodian for decades in the Toronto District School Board. A man who swept the floors and mopped the floors, who kept the classrooms tidy, who locked up at the end of the night so that children had a place to learn and teachers had a place to work. And I carry his story with me. I come into this job very much a servant, like my grandpa. I am here to protect what makes this country special, to protect the rights and freedoms of Canadians, to make sure that this country continues to be a place where people from all over the world can come and find a better life. People like my grandpa, who came here from Scotland, my grandmother, who came here from Ireland, and my father, who came here from Kenya. Now, I am aware that there is a liberal playbook that gets used against people who disagree with this Prime Minister. A playbook that likes to marginalize and vilify anyone who has the audacity to stand up and say what is happening in this country right now is not right. And that playbook the Prime Minister likes to use, likes to cast people who disagree with him as racists. And I would be welcoming the Prime Minister to try that with me. You know, based on our history, I don't think that's going to go so well for him. But I also believe that he is completely out of touch with the needs and desires, the hopes and dreams of our very diverse country and the diverse communities like the one I represent in Durham. He's welcome to take his claims that people who disagree with him are racist to my African father and see how that goes for him. He also uses this liberal playbook to marginalize and vilify Canadians who disagree with him by calling those of us who believe in traditional family values bigots. And I say to him, come to my riding, my diverse riding in Durham, and try that on us, where we have Christians and Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, and Jews living together, all people who believe that mothers and fathers matter. He's welcome to try that with us. And I know his liberal playbook also likes to say that people who disagree with him don't care about the working class or don't care about vulnerable people. And I don't think that's going to work on me either. I am not a trust fund baby. Like most people in this country, I have clawed and I have scraped and worked hard for everything that I have. I don't think the Prime Minister can say the same thing. And the reality is this, He's welcome to try that message on people like my mom. She'd love to have a conversation with him. A woman who raised 3 children by herself, 68 years old, sorry mom, continues to work hard every day because she cannot afford to retire in this NDP Liberal economy. The Liberal playbook is not going to work. They can try their greatest hits, tune up the guitar, tune up the banjo. The greatest hits aren't hitting anymore. And I'm here to deliver that message very, very clearly on behalf of my community in Durham and anyone else in this great country who is unhappy with what is happening and frustrated to feel like they are not able to say what is happening in their hearts and their minds, do not feel validated and affirmed by the reality they experience, not being echoed by many of the institutions across this country who have bought into a narrative that simply does not reflect reality. Now, with the remainder of my time, I'd like to also deliver a message to any young men and young women across this country who might hear my words. My presence in this chamber is a glitch in the system. I'm not supposed to be here. When I was 15 years old, I failed the Ontario literacy test. I was labeled illiterate by the Ontario education system. But I'm here. At the age of 30, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I sat in a recliner with an IV in my arm pumping my body with chemotherapy drugs. I laid on a hospital bed as radiation lasers ran along my spine for months. But I'm here. I took on woke censorship from corporate Canada, looked them dead in the eye, and I'm here. And I've been the subject of hit piece after hit piece from liberal news media. And guess what? I'm here. Yeah. The reality is that many young men and young women are facing a variety of challenges across this country right now, some of whom are facing things that I can't even fathom. But as long as I stand in the House of Commons, as long as I'm honored to call myself a member of Parliament, I hope that I can be a walking, talking reminder that you should never give up. Don't give up on yourself, don't give up on your family, don't give up on your community, and don't give up on this country. And as long as I'm here, I won't give up on them either. Thank you.
Great job. That's right. It happened around 3:45 in the afternoon yesterday. Melanie Joly was out for a walk in the Mile End when a man riding his bike rode up behind her on the sidewalk and demanded she allow more Palestinian refugees into Canada.
Melanie Joly, lift the cap on the number of Palestinian refugees. Lift the cap. No, mais là, attention.
So as you saw, when confronted, Joly turned towards the camera and immediately made multiple attempts to grab the man's phone. The man accused her of attacking him and grabbing onto his sleeve, and then again demanded that she lift the cap on the number of Palestinian refugees. Joly responded, telling him that she's working on it, but that she's currently trying to take a walk and to relax. The man responds by saying, well, I'm happy that you're relaxed while there's a genocide in Palestine, before accusing her of being complicit.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Question Period Canada. How y'all doing? Are you guys familiar with Melanie Joly from the introduction there? She's a pretty little thing. A lot of rumors about her and Trudeau. I don't know if they're true or not, but this girl seems really simple when she speaks. She's the minister, I guess that's called Global Affairs now, but it traditionally had been Foreign Affairs. And when she speaks about these things, guys, like, I think we all get a little bit dumber, actually. Let's take a couple of looks at Melanie Joly. She is easy to look at, but very hard to listen to. So let's take a peek and a listen and see which one we prefer, because, man, not so bad when it's on mute, but boy, oh boy, she's a simpleton. Let's check it out.
Well, hi everybody. I'm happy to be here at the Mosaic Mine meeting with Ryan's team, and being able to see the facility. Yesterday I was in Saskatoon. I went to the synchrotron at the University of Saskatchewan. We announced an important funding of $84 million. Today we're here to meet with people working at Mosaic, highlighting how much the potash industry is important to Canada, but not only that, as the world is really working hard to turn away from the Russian and Belarusian potash industry, we want to make sure that we empower workers here and that they know that they can count on us. Now, today I'm also here as the minister in charge of talking about the budget today, and in that context I want to highlight the fact that we're putting on the table $600 million in tax incentives that could be possibly interesting to Mosaic and its people, but also to the industry as we're trying to work on a net zero future and also trying to empower our great creative minds and our great entrepreneurs across the country. So that's why I'm here, looking around the facility, getting to know much more the industry, and ultimately to show the hardworking Saskatchewan people that we're here for them. So I will say that all in French.
Mélanie Joly is a member of the Liberal Party. She was born in 1979. As a member of the Liberal Party, she represents the Montreal area in the House of Commons, taking office as a member of Parliament following the 2015 federal election. She has held a number of portfolios, including Canadian Heritage, Tourism, and La Francophone. Joly ran for mayor of Montreal in the 2013 Montreal municipal election, placing second behind eventual winner Denis Coderre. Born in Montreal, Quebec, Joly graduated from the University de Montreal and Brasenose College in Oxford. She ain't pretty, she just looks that way, guys. Wait until you see her in committee, like when she is put to the test. She has a sincere voice, but it's a simple voice, guys. Like, here, we just got to check it out in committee. You'll get the best idea by seeing her in action.
I just received a letter from the minister today for a letter I wrote to her in October that talks about the fact that diplomacy will help us with arms sales to Saudi Arabia. I can submit that if you'd like. It is clearly diplomatic. Thank you. So my concern is when we have people like this making these claims, saying these things about innocent civilians, absolutely we need to sanction Hamas. When are you going to be sanctioning these government officials?
Okay, thank you. Well, first, Heather, I know you've been to the region, and I was in the region as well. And what is happening in Gaza is absolutely catastrophic. It's the worst place on earth to live right now. And I think Canadians know that. It is a heartbreaking situation. And meanwhile, we absolutely believe that when it comes to the ICJ, to answer your question, we respect the court, and parties need to make sure that they abide by the decision. And
Minister, that wasn't my question.
I'm sorry, Heather. I'll just continue. And I've raised this issue with my counterpart because we all agree that more humanitarian aid needs to go into Gaza. We all agree that the violence must stop. We all agree that we need to get to a hostage deal, which will eventually lead to a sustainable ceasefire, which will eventually lead, we hope, to a two-state solution. This has been Canada's position, and I hope that that's the case around this table and in the House of Commons with all parties. Now, on the question of UNRWA, I agree that we need to provide humanitarian aid. We all do. There's an important investigation happening right now at the UN. My former colleague, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, Catherine Colonna, has been appointed. It is an important investigation because the allegations are serious. And that being said, we absolutely, meanwhile, need to continue to provide humanitarian aid through different organizations, and the Minister of International Development is in charge of that. Now, when it comes to arms, because you have asked me that question. So you and I and all of us know about our arms trade system. We have one of the most robust in the world. And what I can tell you is, of course, and for those who are watching, how it works is Canadian companies come to see the government to have export permits emitted. So it's not the Canadian government sending weapons. It's actually companies coming to see us. What I can tell you is that there's been no weapons sent under my watch and in recent years, and none since October 7th.
But I did ask about non-military.
I'll just continue.
Minister, if I could ask that you conclude your response in 20 seconds.
Yes, and we have sent, since October 7th, non-lethal equipment, including night vision goggles and protective gears. And that was through Canadian companies sending them to Canadian companies, Israeli companies in Israel.
Okay, so she does come off as being a little simple, perhaps? Let's take another peek at her in committee going one-on-one with somebody that has her outmatched. This time it's Michael Chong.
Minister, when did you first find out that a PRC diplomat was targeting me and my family?
I've learned it through the news.
Why is this diplomat still here?
So I knew you would be asking me this question because it's a valid question. And, just to go back a second, I can only imagine the shock, the pain, the worry that you've gone through, dear Michael, due to the targeting of your family and loved ones. And so, as I mentioned earlier, on a personal level, and, as Foreign Minister, I take this extremely seriously. You've asked me questions regarding foreign interference in the past. I've always said that, of course, we would never tolerate any. And second, we would make sure that, if there was any violation of the Vienna Convention, we would take action.
Minister, Article 9 of the Vienna Convention is clear.
I will just, if I can.
I've heard your answer. It's
no, but I'm not finished.
Well, why is this diplomat still here? Article 9 of the Vienna Convention is clear. Article 9 says that the government can declare a diplomat persona non grata for no reason. The article is clear. So why is this diplomat still here? A diplomat who has more rights and immunities than the Canadians around this table to go around and conduct his foreign interference threat activities. He has diplomatic immunity. He cannot be criminally prosecuted. We all remember the case of the Russian diplomat who mowed down a Canadian citizen in a drunk driving case and killed her, and Minister Manley was unable to do anything about it. You have given accreditation to a diplomat here who is using his diplomatic immunity to target not just me and my family, but other members of Parliament. So why do you, Minister, continue to allow this diplomat to be accredited in this country on Canadian soil? That is the question. And you haven't answered the question.
Well, let me be able to answer the question. And of course, Michael, I understand your frustration and I understand your anger. So
we haven't expelled a single PRC diplomat.
Can I just
We are
finish?
one of the only democratic allies in the NATO alliance that has not expelled a single PRC diplomat. And Canadians are being targeted by the over 100 diplomats accredited
will you allow the minister to respond?
Thank you. So, first and foremost, what we're doing right now as a government is we're assessing the consequences that we'll be facing in case of diplomatic expulsion, because there will be consequences. I think it's important that Canadians know what we've learned from the Two Michael experience is that, of course, China and the PRC will take action. These interests, including economic interests, consular interests, and also diplomatic interests, will be
Minister, I can't think of any
affected,
interest.
and therefore, no,
Minister,
Michael, I just want to finish my answer because this is very important. It's about you, but it's about also the interests of the country. So, as we are assessing the interests, and I know that we are under pressure to go fast, we need to make sure as well that we protect our democracy. And that is why we will take action in light of the facts that are being presented regarding your case and any MP that could be targeted. So that's why my deputy minister right now is meeting with the Chinese ambassador and summoning him, and that's why also we're assessing different options, including the expulsion of diplomats, because it is important that we take a decision.
Minister, just with respect to interests, economic and otherwise, I can't think of an interest more important to the Canadian state than the protection and the safety and the security of its own citizens here on Canadian soil. That trumps all other interests.
I agree with you.
It is inexplicable that this diplomat hasn't been told to leave the country already. And I would hope that the deputy minister is informing the ambassador that this individual, Mr. Weizhou, should be on the first plane out or declared persona non grata. And I think that that is the only course of action here, because if we do not take that course of action, Minister, we are basically putting up a giant billboard for all authoritarian states around the world that says we are open for foreign interference threat activities on Canadian soil, targeting Canadian citizens, and you can conduct these activities with zero consequences. And that's why this individual needs to be sent packing.
So
Mr. Chair, a question
and
about...
I share your concern regarding foreign interference. I share your concern regarding the message we would be sending. I think in order for this country to be safe and prosper, of course, democracy must be at our bedrock. That being said, we will take a decision thoughtfully. We will take a decision that will have the best interests of Canadians and our democracy in mind. But as I mentioned, all options are on the table. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question about the intelligence assessment dated July 20th, 2021. Did your department receive this intelligence assessment?
I was not the Minister for Foreign Affairs. I
understand that, but I'm asking if your department received it.
Yes.
You were appointed minister on October 26th, several months later. I assume that your department received it. The Prime Minister indicated yesterday that that assessment never left CSIS. It seems inexplicable that it would not have left CSIS. CSIS doesn't produce intelligence products for its own consumption. It produces them for departments and central agencies.
Well, as you know, the Prime Minister
I am trying to find out why that information never made it out of CSIS.
So, Michael, the Minister has asked an investigation on this. You know that. You had many conversations with the Prime Minister himself about this issue. You've been briefed about this issue at least 6 times.
You're out of time.
So
I just
you've
like
had
to ask
access to that information.
You're a minute and 20 seconds over time.
No, I'm not.
It says here 6 minutes and 14 seconds.
Yeah, I'm allocated 6 minutes. Rounds.
No, 5 minutes, as I indicated at the start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chong.
There we go, folks. What do you think? Melanie Joly, a little simple. Is she qualified to be our Minister of Global Affairs, Foreign Affairs, Trudeau Affairs, whatever it is? She comes off as a little simple to me. I'm not sure if she can really handle the workload. My name's Aaron. This is Question Period.
Right. So he is opening the door to legalizing hard drugs in Montreal and perhaps in other cities in Quebec. We're against it.
Minister legalized smoking meth in hospital rooms, shooting up heroin in parks next to children, using hard drugs on public transit. The British Columbia government has asked him to reverse this legalization for parks, hospitals, and transit. Will he? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the opioid epidemic is hitting families, communities, and individuals right across this country and has for many, many years. That's why we are continuing to use a an approach grounded in compassion, in public safety and public health, and facts-based decisions. We responded to British Columbia government's asking for a pilot project. We will, yes, work with them to adjust it in ways that they see fit. It's important to make sure that BC continues to do the things that it needs to do to keep people safe in its jurisdiction.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He still refuses to answer the question on whether or not he will reverse himself. He made the decision to exempt hard drugs from the criminal law so that it became legal to smoke meth or crack in a hospital room, including around nurses who are breastfeeding their kids. This has caused chaos, and 6 British Columbians are dying every day that he delays. So will he announce that as of today, he's changed his mind and he's reversing his legalization of hard drugs in BC? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, a number of years ago, British Columbia approached us with a pilot project that they wanted to bring in to look at a different way of dealing with the ongoing public health crisis that was hitting British Columbia around the opioid epidemic. We worked with them as they developed this pilot project, and now that they are asking for modifications to that project, we are looking at those modifications, and we will work with BC as they seek to adjust their plans around public health and around dealing with this opioid epidemic.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, there is no time to waste. The BC government asked him to reverse his legalization of crack, heroin, and other hard drugs in public places on Friday. Every day, 6 British Columbians die of overdoses under this policy, and many more die as a result of drug-induced crimes. So there is no time for bureaucratic and political considerations. Will he announce now that his experiment with legalizing hard drugs in BC is over? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, you will understand if I take it with a little skepticism when the Leader of the Opposition says this is not about politics, because he has been the one that has been pointing out vulnerable people and trying to pursue ideological aims on this ongoing public health crisis. We have consistently stepped up to work with provinces, with municipalities, with jurisdictions, indeed, including by moving forward with British Columbia as they wanted to try a pilot project that we are working with them to adjust in ways that make sense. We understand the urgency and we will act.
We will build a stronger society.
Burnaby South.
Thousands of Canadians are boycotting Loblaws this month. They're taking action because the Prime Minister refuses to take on the corporate greed, which is driving up prices for Canadians. The Prime Minister has set up a grocery task force, which has done no tasks and has no force. Today, Loblaws reported their profits are up by nearly 10%. Liberal announcements aren't going to cut it. Why is this Prime Minister letting big grocery rip off Canadians?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, like many others, we are concerned with the refusal of Loblaws and others to sign on to the Grocery Code of Conduct, which we know will protect consumers, will protect growers across this country as well. We will continue to impress upon them, using various means at our disposal, the importance of signing on to that Grocery Code of Conduct. We have also increased the Competition Bureau's ability to go after big groceries in terms of the competition or the uncompetitive options they're giving to Canadians. And we've also moved forward on other ways of supporting Canadians through groceries, like with the National School Food Program announced in our budget.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Continues to rip off Canadians, and Prime Minister is not stopping them. Les gens savent que...
People know that they are being ripped off at the grocery store. The Prime Minister has failed in protecting people. So many Canadians are tired of waiting for the Prime Minister to take action, so they've decided to boycott big grocers. This is a total leadership failure from the Prime Minister. It is his job to protect Canadians, but he prefers to protect the record profits of big grocers. When will the Prime Minister review his priorities? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to work with big grocery stores to ensure that we can increase competition. We also want them to sign on to the Grocery Code of Conduct. I think it's a positive thing that Canadians are expressing their displeasure with Loblaws for refusing to sign on to the Grocery Code of Conduct for big grocers. We will continue to be here for Canadians. We will increase competition. We're also there for Canadians through the school food program, which will help 400,000 more children in Canada study with full stomachs. We're here to support families through these difficult times, and we will always be here for Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The decision is on his desk to reverse the legalization of hard drugs in British Columbia. The BC government has admitted that it was wrong. They decided not to go ahead with the full 3-year pilot project that the Prime Minister brought in place by exempting hard drugs from criminal law. Will he do as the BC government has done? Admit he was wrong today so we can start saving lives.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the beginning, we've been there to work on an evidence-based, science-based, compassionate public health approach to the opioid epidemic, and that included responding to BC's request for a pilot program. Now that they are asking to adjust this pilot program, we will work with them to adjust it in ways that make sense for them. But given the new, more reasonable tone of the Leader of the Opposition, I wonder if he might take this opportunity to reassure Canadians that he does not support extremist white nationalist organizations like Digalong, nor wants their votes.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that is false. And furthermore, there are 6 people dying every day in British Columbia. There is a 380% increase in overdose deaths in that province under this Prime Minister's legalization and subsidization of hard drugs. Enough trying to score political points over the issue. Do the right thing. It is on his desk. Will he announce today that he has changed his mind and reversed legalization of hard drugs? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, as I said, we're working with British Columbia to adjust their parameters and their desires around the pilot project. We will always be there to work in order to keep Canadians safe. At the same time, I will point out that the Leader of the Opposition refuses to say a simple thing, that he condemns Diagolon because they are a white nationalist violent organization, that he rejects the endorsement of Alex Jones, an extremist conspiracy theorist who denied the deaths of 20 kids at Sandy Hook. These are things that concern Canadians that he should also answer for.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, this is the Prime Minister who has to answer for the people who are dying every day due to his policies. And worse still, he's now considering decriminalizing hard drugs in Toronto. The City Hall has made a formal request for him to use powers under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act to do in Canada's biggest city what he already did in British Columbia. Today, I wrote him a letter asking him to change his mind and reverse his position and make clear that he will not legalize hard drugs on buses and in hospitals in Toronto.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, we see fear-mongering going on by the Leader of the Opposition right now. I will recall for people that a number of years ago, the City of Vancouver approached us with a desire to decriminalize in their city, and we said, no, we would not do that for Vancouver. We work with provinces and public health systems. That is why we moved forward with British Columbia on a pilot project they wanted. In regards to any other other province, whether it be Quebec or Ontario or anywhere else, we will work with the governments in place on proposals they may or may not have to deal with the opioid epidemic. That's all.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
You still won't clearly answer the question, Mr. Speaker, which is doubly concerning, because Toronto has been overtaken by crime and chaos since he brought in the catch and release policies under Bill C-75, C-5, and C-83. Violent crime is up 40%. We just heard the tragic story on Monday of a liquor store robber crashing into a family, tragically killing grandparents and a precious child. The assailant was out on bail. Will he repeal catch and release?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I believe if you or other parliamentarians or indeed Canadians look at the transcripts of these questions and answers, they will see that I actually did answer the questions the Leader of the Opposition posed to me in terms of how we were going to work with British Columbia and how we would work with any province that came forward with positions to try and help with the opioid epidemic, and we would examine those on their merits. But the Leader of the Opposition has not answered Canadians' concerns about why he will not condemn Diagolon, the far-right extremist organization, why he will not reject the endorsement of Alex Jones, noted conspiracy theorist.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, he has not answered the question whether he would expand decriminalization elsewhere. He's using vague references to jurisdictions, but it's his jurisdiction alone to grant exemptions under the Controlled Drug and Substances Act. So, will he admit that his real plan is to take the decriminalization of hard drugs that he imposed on British Columbia and do that in all the provinces and territories across the country?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker. I think for 8 years, for almost 9 years now, Canadians have seen that our approach on the opioid epidemic is grounded in public safety, in public health, in compassion, in funding frontline workers, and doing things that work to save lives and help people. And it is not to have some sort of secret plan, as he proposes. But if he wants to talk about secret plans, he would probably do well to actually clear the air for Canadians about his seeking for support amongst members of extremist right-wing organizations like Diagolon.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that is again false, but the government is now suddenly and only partially changing its message on decriminalization. The Prime Minister's Minister of Addictions is out now saying she's waiting for more information from British Columbia on its request to recriminalize crack, heroin, meth, and other hard drugs in hospitals, transit, and parks. Mr. Speaker, there are 6 people dying every single day. What more information does he need?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there are dozens of people dying every day in provinces right across this country from the opioid epidemic. We could talk about the challenges faced in Alberta. We could talk about the challenges faced in Ontario. We could talk about the challenges faced right across the country. And different provinces and jurisdictions have different approaches. Some work better, some haven't worked as well. We will continue to be there in a thoughtful, compassionate, rigorous, science-based way to work with jurisdictions on directions that work best for them and adjust those proposals and those responses as necessary. That's what a responsible government does.
In Canada's biggest city, gun crime is up 66%. It's 100% nationwide. I just shared the tragic story of someone out on bail slamming his car into an innocent family, 2 wonderful grandparents dead, a beautiful baby dead. He was out on bail under the Prime Minister's catch and release C-75. How many more will have to die before he repeals catch and release and brings jail, not bail, for repeat offenders?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I will highlight that we worked with provinces, including many provincial Conservative leaders across this country, to bring in bail reform. We'll continue to work on things that are keeping Canadians safe. At the same time, the leader opposite talked about gun crime. Well, we move forward with some of the strongest measures on gun control that this country has ever seen. A freeze on the purchase of handguns, a total ban on assault-style weapons that has been in place for 4 years. These are the kinds of things that the Conservative Party and its leader have consistently stood against, even as we move to make our communities even safer.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He mentioned all these guns that he claims to have banned and promised to seize 4 years and $40 million ago. How many has he seized?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there are thousands of different types of assault-style weapons that for the past 4 years have been rendered illegal to sell, illegal to buy, and illegal to use, including at a gun range. Mr. Speaker, we are now working on a program to allow those owners to sell them back to the government for them to be destroyed and get money so they can go buy other guns or other products if they want to that will be legal. This is about fairness, even as we move to keep Canadians safe. Unfortunately, the Leader of the Opposition wants to make those assault weapons legal again.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
All those weapons are still legal, Mr. Speaker. You can still own them. The Prime Minister says he's going to seize them. He's going to buy them. He spent $40 million doing that. So I'm going to ask again, how many guns has he bought? Just the number.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as the Leader of the Opposition knows, we are in the process of establishing that buyback program. The priority was making sure that those guns were no longer available to buy, to sell, to bequeath, or to use, Mr. Speaker, and that has been the case for 4 years. Now, what the Leader of the Opposition is conveniently refusing to opine on is the fact that he has committed to the gun lobby across this country that he would reverse the 2020 OIC that banned those assault-style weapons. He wants to bring those assault-style weapons back, or he can contradict me right here.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I will contradict him because they're not banned right now. It's perfectly legal for people to possess those guns. They are easy to possess, and not one of them has been. The answer to the question is that he has not seized a single solitary one of them. He spent 40 million tax dollars that could have secured our ports and our borders, and he hasn't taken in a single solitary gun. Is that why gun crime has risen by 100% since he became Prime Minister 9 years ago?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I will note, as did everyone in this chamber, that the Leader of the Opposition did not deny that he will be reversing the ban on assault-style weapons. He doesn't even think it exists right now. Well, Mr. Speaker, it does exist right now. It is illegal to buy, sell, or use any of those weapons. When the amnesty ends next year, it will be illegal to own them as well. We're giving an opportunity for people to sell them back to the government. That is what we are doing to keep people safe. That is what he will not commit to keeping.
The Honourable Member from Nunavut.
In Nunavut, the Arctic Children and Youth Foundation administers the Inuit Child First initiative to help kids. But their great work is being made difficult by this government's delays. Close to 70% of requests were not processed on time, leaving traumatized children without the health care they deserve. When will this Liberal government finally ensure First Nations and Inuit children can get the care they need in a timely manner?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Kuyanamik, for your question, I absolutely agree that there is more to do. Over the past years, we have made significant historic investments in Nunavut, in the Northwest Territories, in the Yukon, in responding to the health needs, particularly of Indigenous, Inuit, First Nations, and Métis children. We will continue to step up. There is more to do, but my work with Premier Ahiaguk and others is entirely focused on delivering more services to young people in a timely manner, more housing, more infrastructure, more health care. These are things we are working on. We will continue to do that work.
The honourable member from Courtenay, Alberni.
In the last year, deaths related to the toxic drug crisis are up 17% in Alberta and 23% in Saskatchewan. Every toxic overdose death is preventable, but in provinces with Conservative premiers that don't have safe supply or decriminalization and don't believe in harm reduction, deaths are soaring. Alberta is on a trajectory to have the most toxic drug deaths per capita in Canada by June. Treatment, recovery, and harm reduction go hand in hand. Will the Liberals finally make sure all Canadians whose lives could be saved have access to these life-saving supports?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank the member for Port Alberni for bringing up those stats that show that there are real challenges around the opioid and toxic drug supply epidemic right across the country. Every step of the way, this government will continue to be anchored in a compassionate, evidence-based approach that looks at it as a public health crisis. We will work with provincial governments across all jurisdictions to move forward on measures that support and save lives. That is our commitment to Canadians. That we will continue to do.
I'll get back to this at the end of the House, end of this question period, but I encourage all members to continue, aside perhaps from the last question, to continue in the positive vein, which I think Canadians have noticed that members have been taking today. The honourable member, the honourable leader of the opposition.
2 years ago, after having doubled the rent, doubled mortgage payments, and doubled the needed down payment for a home, the Prime Minister promised in his budget that he would double home building. Here we are, 2 years later, and home building is down 8%. His housing agency says it will be down next year and the year after that. If it cost him $89 billion in programs to bring home building down, how much would he have to spend to bring it up?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our housing plan is focused on fairness for every generation. We, over the coming years, will be unlocking 3.8 million new homes by cutting red tape, by rezoning, by lowering the costs of home building, by using public lands and vacant office buildings to build affordable housing for Canadians. We will be reviving the dream of home ownership for young Canadians by making it easier to save up for a tax-free down payment and giving renters credit for their monthly rent payments towards the ability to get a mortgage. We've put forward the most comprehensive, ambitious housing plan this country has ever seen.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The only thing it doesn't do is build homes. Since he made the most recent promise in 2022 to double housing construction, the number of builds is actually down and expected to continue to drop next year and the year after that, according to his own housing agency. Yet, he says we should all be assured because once again, he's spending tens of billions of dollars on the problem that he created. So can you tell us, in what year will home building actually rise? Which year?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we know well that the federal government has an important role to play in ensuring housing starts across the country and ensuring the opportunities for Canadians to buy their first home, to move forward up the equity ladder. These are things that we know we have a role to play in. But we are not alone in that, Mr. Speaker, which is why we are challenging and encouraging municipalities and provinces to also step up with ambition in our national housing home building plan. This is why we're putting incentives on the table. We're putting investments in the pockets of municipalities, including with our Accelerator Fund. There is more to do, but we will be doing it in partnership.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
That's what he's been saying for 9 years. And the result has been double the rent, double the mortgage payment, double the down payment. And just this week, a survey showed that 72% of Canadians who don't own a home believe they never will. Canada was not like this before this Prime Minister, and surely it won't be like this after he's gone. The Prime Minister a comment on what it's like to be the only Prime Minister in history to deprive an entire generation of home ownership.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the government that was in place before I became Prime Minister had a housing minister who is now the Leader of the Opposition, in a government that explicitly said that the federal government had no role to play and no responsibility towards building affordable housing across this country. So for 10 years, there was very little, there was almost no federal involvement in building homes across this country. We turned that around starting in 2017, and we will continue to invest, to create opportunities, to create fairness for millennials and Gen Z so that they can buy.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, he did turn it around, Mr. Speaker. 9 years is obviously too long for him because he's starting to attribute to the previous government words he said himself.
Yeah.
He was the one who said the federal government is not responsible for home housing construction or affordability. That is after he doubled the cost. When I was housing minister, we built 89,000 apartments at an average rent of $973. Since then, the rent has doubled, the mortgage payment has doubled, the needed down payment has doubled. So with all this failure, why is he doubling down?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our Housing Accelerator program, our comprehensive plan to build more homes, to make sure that Canadians can see themselves in home ownership once again, is exactly what we are continuing to invest in. Yes, I pointed out that we cannot build homes alone, that we need partners in the provinces and municipalities, but I never denied that the federal government needs to continue to act on housing. That's why we've done that since 2017. That's why we're continuing to do it now. We need to make sure that young Canadians have opportunities their parents and grandparents have. That's what we're stepping up for. That's what he refuses to do.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister is not worth the cost of debt interest. He doubled our national debt, adding more debt than all previous Prime Ministers combined. And now we learn in his new budget bill that he's going to seek another $300 billion of debt, money that he will borrow out of the economy. That's equal to over 10% of our GDP, which will surely put upward pressure on interest rates. How much will all this government binge borrowing add to the mortgage payment of the average family?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, allow me once again to set the facts straight. Canada has one of the strongest fiscal positions of any country in the world. Certainly the lowest deficit in the G7, the best debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and it's continuing to decrease. And we are the third largest economy in the world with a AAA credit rating, the top credit rating by the agencies that look at fiscal sustainability of governments. All that is on the backdrop of further investments we're making, generational investments to support Canadians, contrast with the ideology of the Conservatives, which is to leave Canadians to fend for themselves, cuts and austerity.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we actually have the highest mortgage debt of any country in the G7, and by far higher as a share of our economy than the Americans had during the mortgage meltdown. Now interest rates are higher and families risk losing their homes. Government deficits push inflation and interest rates higher. That makes the problem worse. So once again, how much will $300 billion of yet more debt add in mortgage payments for the average Canadian family? How much?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is mixing different factors that are facing Canadians. Mortgages are high for Canadian families, and therefore the Canadian government is choosing to invest in measures that are going to support Canadian families. I talked to a family from Burlington who actually saw their mortgage mortgage payments go up because of the rise in global interest rates, while at the same time as their child care fees were cut by larger amounts because of investments this government made. We're going to continue to be there for Canadians while the Conservative leader wants cuts.
The honourable member from Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, the government has a responsibility.
Oops. Okay.
I apologize to the Leader of the Opposition. I miscounted in terms of the questions that we're keeping track. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, inflation and higher interest rates are the costs Canadians pay for the spending that the Prime Minister told them was free. It's not free. Nothing is free. Every dollar he spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians directly through taxes or indirectly through inflation and interest rates. Now he wants to do another $300 billion of binge borrowing. Will he put aside that radical scheme and instead accept my common sense plan to fix the budget with a dollar-for-dollar law so we can bring down interest rates and inflation for Canadians?
Here. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have been there to invest for Canadians responsibly. We still have one of the top AAA-rated economies in the world. Our fiscal plan is sustainable and responsible. However, the Conservative leader still wants to make cuts to programs, cuts to our military, cuts to the initiatives that are helping Canadians across the country. The things that we are doing are helping Canadians grow for the future in a responsible way, and that's why we're seeing inflation come down and interest rates will be coming down, I am sure, in the coming months.
Now it is time to the Honourable Member from Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, the government has a responsibility to tackle misinformation and disinformation in Canada. Furthermore, the government has a responsibility to tackle hate and discrimination across Canada. And it's shameful that the Leader of the Opposition posed for photos with extremists who push hateful rhetoric. Can the Prime Minister please tell the House how the government is taking these matters seriously?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have every right to be worried about the opposition leader's refusal, including multiple times during this question period, refusal to condemn violent extremism. But they shouldn't be surprised. Over his 19 years in politics, he showed Canadians time and time again that he will do or say anything to get elected. That includes pandering to extremists one day and pretending to stand with the very vulnerable communities those extremist groups target the next. Not only is this reckless, this is a failure of leadership. Canadians deserve better. Canadian deserves leaders that will stand up for them every step of the way.
The Honourable Member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Canadians with disabilities have been ignored by Liberals and Conservatives for decades. The result? They can no longer keep up with the costs of living. And the Liberals' solution? $200 a month. That's not even enough for groceries. Exactly. Meanwhile, Canada's richest CEOs are still receiving $60 billion in corporate handouts started by the Conservatives. Right. With the Liberals and the Conservatives, Canada's ultra-wealthy get richer and people with disabilities get crumbs. Why has the Prime Minister abandoned Canadians living with disabilities?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada Disability Benefit is a monumental step in our strong and unwavering commitment to creating a more inclusive and fairer Canada. We're now moving forward with the first step of the disability benefit at the cost of over $6 billion over the coming years. It will put hundreds of dollars a month tax-free in the pockets of the most vulnerable persons with disabilities, and we're continuing to commit to creating a better, fairer country for generations to come.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, more than 20 economic organizations in the country have raised a red flag over the major risk of failure in the implementation of a new computer software scheduled for May 13th to manage Canada Border Services Agency assessments and revenues after the financial and human disasters of Phoenix and ArriveCan. It would be a catastrophe to have a third failure, again costing millions of taxpayers' dollars. Can the Prime Minister tell us whether his government intends to postpone the implementation date and what he intends to do to ensure that this doesn't turn into another IT fiasco that would cost millions? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are very aware of the concerns from different groups in this sector and from the Canada Border Services Agency. We are working closely to ensure we have a success and so we can set up a better software. We know that digitalization will ensure more security, more efficiency, more speed in our international trade and when people are crossing our borders. So we will continue to advance on this, but we will do it attentively and aware of the risks and also of the positive side of a new software. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Questions orales. The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
When will the Prime Minister make it illegal to smoke crack in a hospital room? Just the date, please.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the province of BC made a request for a temporary pilot project. BC now has concerns about that project, which we share. We are now working together to address those concerns. Opioid addiction is a tragedy that has affected far too many Canadian families. We have to work together to solve it, not score cheap partisan points off the pain of Canadians. There are no pilot projects anywhere else in Canada. Good job.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
Because of this government's decision, it is no longer illegal to smoke crack, meth, or shoot up heroin in public spaces in British Columbia like parks, hospitals, and public transit. The British Columbia government has now begged the Prime Minister to reverse this decision. So, simple question, when will the Prime Minister once again make it illegal to smoke crack in a hospital room? Just the date.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the Conservatives, we believe in working together with Canadians to solve our country's most pressing problems. That's why earlier this week I was in touch with Premier Eby and I assured him that we share his concerns and we are working urgently together to address them. And let's remember, opioid addiction is a tragedy which is afflicting so many Canadian families. Let's work together to help them, not score cheap partisan points.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
Dangerous addictions are hurting Canadians. After this government's decision to change the law, overdose deaths shot up and drug-related crime went through the roof. Now, the British Columbia government is asking for the government to reverse their decision. It's a simple question, it's a simple decision to make. So one final time, Mr. Speaker. On what date will this government make it illegal to smoke crack in a hospital room? Just the date.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the Conservative House Leader, I've actually been in touch with the Premier of BC about this truly pressing issue. And unlike the Conservatives, we are working collaboratively with the province of BC. We share their concerns and we are working together to support public health and public safety. What we're not doing is fundraising off of the pain, death, and suffering of Canadians.
The honourable member from Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have been letting the ultra-rich off the hook for years. But thanks to the NDP's capital gains changes, the wealthiest will pay a little more. And the Conservative leader doesn't like this. Maybe that's why he's getting wined and dined tonight by Bay Street billionaires at a Cash for Access fundraiser. Like the Liberals, the Conservatives would rather hand out billions to wealthy CEOs than fund the services people really need. Why are the Liberals maintaining the Conservatives' corporate giveaways?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am really glad that the member opposite has raised an issue about which the Conservatives have been notably silent, and that is our increase in the inclusion rate on capital gains. We agree with the member opposite that it is just not fair for a nurse or carpenter to pay tax at a higher marginal rate than a multimillionaire. But I agree with the member opposite. I think the Conservatives support that kind of unfair tax policy.
The honourable member from Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
The Liberal Minister for legalizing hard drugs is misleading Canadians. Yesterday, she told Canadians that Liberals were waiting for further information from British Columbia in response to BC's request to end this legalization experiment. Yet, just yesterday, the BC minister responsible told us that they had responded to the government in just a few hours. This, when BC had 2,500 overdoses in just 1 year. Why are the Liberals misleading Canadians, and will they end their radical drug policy?
The Honourable Minister for Addictions and Mental Health.
Mr. Speaker, the opioid crisis is affecting communities and families across this country, and it's a tragedy. That is why the BC government approached the federal government for a 3-year pilot program. BC communities are facing extremely serious challenges, and people are dying from deadly street drugs, and public consumption is a concern. BC is amending their proposal, and we are supporting them in this work, Mr. Speaker, because that's what we do. We partner together to save lives. What is their plan, Mr. Speaker?
The honourable member from Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Well, they did partner together. They partnered together for a radical policy that has led to countless deaths. Imagine an elderly woman in hospital having to sit beside somebody, lay beside somebody who is smoking crystal meth.
The honourable member to start again. I'm hearing some voices from the far end of this room, which I cannot hear, and I'll ask the honourable member to start his question from the top. The honourable member from Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
The minister is correct. The Liberals have partnered with somebody. They partnered with the provincial NDP to create a crisis of unprecedented proportions that led to people dying due to their radical policy. After 9 years, this Liberal NDP government is flooding the market with free drugs. This is happening to our brothers, our sisters, our fathers, our mothers, our children. They are all being fueled with addiction of the free drugs. Will the Prime Minister reverse course and end his radical experiment of legalization?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we work with our provincial jurisdictions to ensure the health and safety of Canadians in the face of this toxic drug supply. We are treating this with urgency, Mr. Speaker, and all partners are working together to find a path forward as fast as possible to provide operational clarity for law enforcement, healthcare services, and all those who are involved in saving lives, Mr. Speaker. We want the same thing, public safety and access to public health care services for those who need it. They would cut everything. We are here to save lives. John.
Before I pass the microphone again to the minister, for the honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country, I'm going to ask all members, please, to hold your comments until you're recognized to have the floor. The honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal minister responsible for legal hard drugs in British Columbia isn't being straight with Canadians. Yesterday, she said she's waiting for more data from BC to decide if she would reverse her decision to legalize drugs like cocaine, opioids, and fentanyl in parks, playgrounds, and hospitals. The BC NDP confirmed yesterday they answered the Liberal government's request for more data within hours. Wow. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, drug deaths tragically rose 380%, as if that wasn't enough data. Why won't the Liberals be honest with Canadians and just end their radical drug policies?
That's a great question.
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we speak to our provincial counterparts and those who are the experts and with lived and living experience. The opposition, the member from Carleton, won't even meet with Mom Stop the Harm or other experts and those who are advocating for their families and their lives. We continue to work with our BC counterparts. They have provided amendments to their proposals, and we are working together to face the public consumption issues.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I speak to residents in my community, and the minister isn't listening to British Columbians. She didn't listen to BC mayors who wanted to stop open drug use in their community a year ago. She's not listening to BC parents horrified to find crack pipes and needles near schools and playgrounds. A student project from a school in my community had students writing to me about issues important to them. Unbelievably, crime and open drug use was the #1 issue. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Why won't these Liberals be honest with Canadians and just end their radical drug policy?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, Conservatives aren't genuine with Canadians about their care or concern for those who are dying from the toxic drug supply. The opposition leader talks a big talk about investing in treatment, but Conservatives cut 2/3 of their drug treatment fund when they were in power, Mr. Speaker. They only focus on treatment and recovery. They don't focus on safe consumption sites. They don't focus on harm reduction as health care. Mr. Speaker, we need to partner with everyone. When will they listen?
The Honourable Member from Mission Mashpee Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal minister responsible for legal hard drugs is misleading Canadians. Drug overdoses are now the leading cause of death among youth aged 10 to 18 in British Columbia.
Shameful.
Just yesterday, she said she was waiting on more information from the BC NDP government, which the province said they delivered within hours. How much more information does she need to end their radical and extremist policy, which is putting the children of British Columbia at risk?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the Conservatives, I have been in touch with the province of BC. BC requested the pilot project, and I was in touch this week with the Premier of BC. He and his government have serious concerns about the pilot project. We share those concerns, and we are working together with BC to address them. But I do want to say, making political hay out of the pain of suffering Canadian families is simply irresponsible.
That's it.
The Honourable Member from Mission Mashpee Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, this government is supposed to be in the business of protecting children, not killing them with exposure and access to hard drugs. The RCMP has confirmed that legal hard drugs are being sold on the black market. In Abbotsford, the Soccer Association has to regularly sweep the needles for pitch. The Legion and many businesses in Mission have to deal with crack smoke every day. When will this government do the right thing and cancel their ideologically extreme experiment to legalize hard drugs and start protecting BC's children?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as a mother of 3, including teenagers, I care so much about Canada and Canadians, and I agree, opioid addiction is a tragedy. It is a public health tragedy, and it is a public safety tragedy. But let me tell you what is putting the public safety of all Canadians at risk. Consorting with white supremacists and misogynists. That is a public safety risk. The Conservatives have an opportunity today to disavow that. They should do it.
From Thornhill.
The Liberal
Liberal government's dangerous drug policy in BC allows people to smoke crack on a public bus, to shoot up next to a park with people with children playing there, to blow smoke from meth in the face of a nurse in a hospital. Now we learn what the Liberals want to do to Toronto, what they've done to BC. The Leader of the Opposition sent the Prime Minister a letter asking him to reject Toronto's request. Are the nurses in Toronto getting people who smoke meth in hospital rooms, or will they finally reject the request?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are completely committed to working with communities across this country in facing the opioid crisis and the tragedies that are happening to so many families. Every request is reviewed on a case-by-case basis. The member should know this. Toronto Public Health has not submitted a proposal that adequately addresses the dual objectives of public health and public safety, which have guided us throughout addressing the opioid crisis. Every level of government, including the province, must be engaged in this process, and we continue to work together.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Speaker, their plan is killing 22 Canadians every day, and opioid deaths have doubled in this country in just 2 years. I can't believe that the Minister from Toronto wants to expand this lawlessness into her own city. Otherwise, she would just say no. I'll give her an opportunity to just say that. One more opportunity to stop this extremist experiment on the streets of Toronto. Yes or no? Will you reject it?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm a minister, I'm a Toronto MP, I'm a Toronto mother. I know, as everyone in this House should, that the opioid crisis is a tragedy, and there are no families in Canada that are untouched by it. The BC pilot project was requested by BC. BC has serious concerns. We share those concerns. We are addressing it. There is no other pilot project anywhere in Canada, and the BC experience should and will be instructive.
The Honourable Member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, it's been 24 hours since the Leader of the Opposition sent the Prime Minister a letter asking him to reject Toronto City Hall's request to legalize hard drugs. And we're getting no serious answers from this NDP Liberal government. After seeing death and disorder in BC, why can't the Prime Minister take the no-brainer and say no? At what time today can we expect an answer to Toronto City Hall?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I think the members opposite were not listening to my previous answer. The only pilot project in Canada is in BC. BC has serious concerns. We share them, and we're acting urgently together to resolve them. There are no other pilot projects anywhere in Canada. I think all Canadians are aware of the BC experience and need to take it into account. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? We've invested $200 billion in the healthcare system. They voted against it.
Yes.
The Honourable Member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
People in Port Moody, Coquitlam are struggling to keep up with the skyrocketing rents and grocery prices. Meanwhile, the Conservative leader is schmoozing with Canada's wealthiest at a $3,500 a year wine club. This is the guy who said he'd cut dental care and pharmacare in favor of keeping billion-dollar corporate handouts. And the Liberals are no better. They're letting big grocery CEOs rack up obscene profits while Canadians go hungry. When will the Liberals stop this corporate greed?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, in the recent federal budget, we put forward a plan to establish fairness for every generation that's going to ask the wealthiest to pay a little bit more so we can fund the things that really matter to the people who've been struggling the last couple of years. We've got plans that are going to reduce the cost of living by reducing the cost of housing, by solving the housing crisis. We've got a plan to launch a national school food program to make sure that hungry kids can put food on the table. And as I give this answer, the Conservatives jeer because because they do not support the measures that are going to help vulnerable people in this country. We will stand up for the middle class. We will stand up for the vulnerable. It's a shame the Conservatives won't join us.
The honourable member from Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, while rich CEOs make record profits, families in Nanaimo Ladysmith can barely put food on the table. And what's the Conservative leader doing about it? Well, he's hosting a fundraiser with Canada's richest elites that cost thousands just to step through the door. It's no wonder when he was in power, the biggest corporations got $60 billion in handouts while gutting services to British Columbians. And the Liberals, they maintain these handouts. Will the government end these corporate giveaways?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I would agree with my colleague that it's disturbing to see the leader of the opposition siding with big corporate at a time where, Mr. Speaker, all Canadians should be united to put pressure on the grocery in this country, Mr. Speaker. If they are really honest about caring for Canadians on the other side, Mr. Speaker, let them speak up. Let them tell to Loblaws and Walmart to adopt the grocery code of conduct in this country, Mr. Speaker. If we speak with one voice, we're going to improve the lives of Canadians. Are they going to do it?
Grenville, Thousand Island, and Rideau Lakes.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, the employment minister has been caught in shady lobbying, and we can see that this Prime Minister and his government certainly aren't worth the cost or the corruption. The minister was caught cashing checks from a lobbying firm that was lobbying his own government, his own ministry. How much taxpayer cash did this minister and his company shove in their pockets? How much? How much? How much?
The Honourable Government House Leader. Order. Order. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, the minister has always followed the very strict ethics rules that apply to him as an elected official. Canada has one of the strictest ethics regimes in the world for elected officials, and that is exactly what Canadians expect. The minister has always conducted himself in an ethical manner that follows the spirit and letter of those rules.
That's right. Good answer.
The Honourable Member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Well, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, we know that the fish rots from the head down, and this Prime Minister twice found guilty of breaking ethics laws, along with multiple members of his front bench and his back bench. We know that the minister tried to hide that he was getting money from his company that was lobbying his own government, even his own ministry, but he got caught. Global News reported it, and now we're asking him about it. So instead of having the government House Leader protect him from his own accountability, his own actions, will he stand up today and tell us how much money he took?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I just gave that answer. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader, Honourable Member from Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes. Oh, I'm sorry. We only. I never knew I was so popular on this side. The Honourable Member from Dorval,
The Honourable Member for Dorval, Lachine-LaSalle. Mr. Speaker, as we approach Red Dress Day, which raises awareness of the alarming rates of violence,
Joint calls for the introduction of a red dress alert system.
Edmonton.
Speaker, the sole Liberal minister from Alberta is at the centre of two corruption scandals. It has been reported that the minister is tied to a lobbyist who received a staggering $110 million in federal contracts, and the minister is the director of a company that received a further $8 million of government contracts and is engulfed in allegations of fraud and wire fraud. So how much money did this minister and his companies receive from these shady contracts?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier in response to our other honourable friend, the Minister has always followed the strict ethics rules that apply to him as an elected official. Canada has one of the strictest ethics regimes in the world for elected officials, and that is exactly what Canadians expect. The Minister has always conducted himself in an ethical manner that follows the spirit and letter of those rules.
That's right.
The Honourable Member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has been on the take with taxpayers' money. The Minister retains a 50% stake in a company that is engulfed in allegations of fraud, and the Minister continues to receive payments from the lobbying firm that received $110 million in federal contracts. So will the Minister finally have the guts to stand in his place and tell Canadians how much he pocketed off taxpayers?
I will come back to this matter later, but I do warn members, please, to be very careful about what they say about other honourable members. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, in this House, all members are entitled to be treated by other members with a presumption of being honourable. That is not what this member has just done. I would invite him to carefully consider the words that he just employed while doing a speech into a television camera, one that he would never do were we outside this chamber. And I would invite that member to be very, very careful with his words in the future.
The Honourable Member from Brantford, Brant.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, yet another Liberal minister is embroiled in an ethics scandal. This employment minister continued to serve as a director of a company that secured over $8 million in government contracts. And his former lobbying firm got direct access to the Prime Minister's office and the Finance Minister's office, everyone who has their hands on the purse strings. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the corruption. Simple question. How much did this minister or his companies receive since he's been in cabinet?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I've answered that question, and I would once again invite members from all sides of this House to be very, very careful with the words that they utter.
The Honourable Member from West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Size Country.
Mr. Speaker, Budget 2024 proposes funding for Canada's first ever action plan on combating hate, which will support community outreach, law enforcement reform, tackle the rise in hate crimes, enhance community security, counter radicalization, and increase support for victims. This plan was drafted way before Canadians realized that the leader of the official opposition was cozying up with white nationalists. Can the Minister please tell this House what impacts far-right extremism has on our community?
The Honourable Minister for Diversity.
Mr. Speaker, combating hate is a responsibility of everyone in this House. Anything otherwise is shameful and frankly appalling. When the leader of the opposition decided to cozy up to far-right extremist supporters, it is unbecoming of any elected official, much less the leader of the major political party.
That's what you're doing.
When the Honourable Member from St. Albert, Edmonton was asking his question, it was recommended by the chair. The chair was quite happy to make sure that the Honourable Member had a free time to be able to ask his question. I'd ask the Honourable Member, please, to hold back his comments while the Minister is answering. The Honourable Minister for Diversity from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, when the leader of the opposition decided to cozy up to far-right extremist supporters, it is unbecoming of any elected official, much less the leader of a major Canadian political party. Canadians expect their leaders to stand up for Canadian values. That's why, Mr. Speaker, we're investing $270 million in the budget for Canada's first ever action plan on combating hate. Mr. Speaker, that's leadership.
Double standards. Consistent double standards. You're doing a great job. Get some order in this House.
The honourable member from Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday 10,000 Canadian rail workers voted to strike because, in part, Canada's two largest railway companies want to undermine key safety measures in their collective agreements. The safety of rail workers, the safety of rail communities, and the safety of our environment are all at stake. Will the minister ensure the parties remain at the bargaining table until a fair, safe, and equitable agreement is reached? Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister for Labour.
Question. What is happening right now is a cooling off period, is a normal part of the collective bargaining process. Our facilitators and conciliators remain closely with both parties at the table. We remain committed on this side, as I know the honourable member is, to making sure that the table remains, the best deals are made at the table. Thank you very much for the question.
The honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Mr. Speaker, even for the Liberals, this is really something. It's a hat trick. 3 times, 3 different platform promises broken in one omnibus budget bill. First up, they broke the commitment to have UNDRIP honored and to consult with Indigenous people. Second, they used an omnibus budget bill to change environmental legislation. Third, once again, they failed to fix the Environmental Assessment Act. Let's make it simple. Environmental assessment under Mulroney's law worked. Harper repealed it. It still doesn't work. This draft in this Ways and Means bill will go down to defeat at the Supreme Court once again. Fix it once and for all and use the environmental expert panel to guide your actions.
Stephen Guilbeault, Secretary.
Sorry guys for that to be confusing. We're going to cross over into something else. That wraps up the week pretty much. There was a Friday, but I'm not going to make you sit through that. I've got a couple of more fun videos for you guys to watch. These are pretty fun. These are my friends at Rebel News. Like, they're an entertaining group. You've maybe seen these videos before. If you haven't, check out their channel, like, subscribe. They do good stuff. They're fun. Anyways, we're going to wrap up on that. It's been a very fun weekend. Good to see everybody. Welcome to all the new viewers. That's crazy. There's so many people hanging out now. It gets really busy when I don't have my the people that help me with this. I've got Sheila and Kirk that really take care of that part. But here on a quiet Saturday night, we met some new people, and my goodness, some of the people that come back I love. Like, it's just fun to see you there, Two Flips. Anyways, we're going to end on this. Let's check it out. It's pretty good.
Lied to me this morning about the time and location of his press conference in order to hide her boss from Rebel News question. We caught it on camera and we are going to show it to you. Mr. Guilbeault, I just want to clarify something. Ever since myself and Ezra Levin asked you a question earlier this week outside of the summit, our team had our media accreditation removed until we issue a legal demand letter in response. Today, for us to get inside this conference, I was lied about this conference to be postponed and to be changed, and nobody had get back to me. It was hard to get here. So how come the United Nations and yourself are not for press freedom? Alexa here in Ottawa, covering the other side of the story at the United Nations Plastic Summit. Elites and delegates from around the world flew in to discuss the future of plastic. These people are unelected and thus unaccountable. These foreigners consume huge amounts of fuel to travel to Canada while telling ordinary people to reduce our fuel consumption. Rebel News received accreditation to take part in this event, and we thanked the UN for this. Telling the other side of the story and asking hard questions is our mandate, and it is usually not welcome at such events. There were several moments, however, where some people tried to obstruct our journalism. Stephen Guilbeault refused to answer questions asked of him by his relevant on the first day of the conference, while surrounded by his large entourage of drones.
You claim that your Twitter account was a personal account. If that's the case, why didn't you pay the fine personally?
Stephen Guilbeault was clearly unhappy with this incident, but that's part of the politician job that they sign in for. Following this, all our media accredited team members receive emails changing our accreditation status to pending. The press conference with Guilbeault was postponed, maybe to buy them time to figure out what to do with us, while a United Nations man tried to expel us from the room.
I don't want to miss it. I know, but it's just 2 minutes.
No.
Just 2 minutes.
No, I'm sorry. After?
Yeah. Sorry?
After.
After the press conference?
Yes. Thank you.
We stood our ground, though. Both UN staff and Guilbeault's team panicked after we politely asked 2 questions.
Ezra Levant for Rebel News, and I'd like to thank the UN for accrediting a citizen journalist outlet like us. Mr. Guilbeault, according to the Globe and Mail, you serve on the China Council for International Cooperation on Environment and Development, which is a government agency controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Is that a conflict of interest with your role as a Canadian cabinet minister? And is it perhaps why you have really been gentle on China, even though it is by far the world's largest polluter, including with plastics pollution?
Our accreditation status was quickly restored that same day, thanks to our lawyer who sent a legal letter to the United Nations. Their first tactic to cancel us failed. They again tried to obstruct our journalism the next day, but we were still accredited.
You have somebody from the UN come in.
Okay.
To deal with your pass not functioning, okay?
Yeah, okay, perfect.
It should be down in a few seconds. If you just want to step aside to let the other person.
A UN drone employee told me that someone complained about us after our street scrum.
Yeah.
Why then
Yeah, exactly.
all my colleagues suddenly receive all the same email
Yes.
that Rebel News was pending?
Oh no, yesterday, the receiving of the pending news yesterday was because a complaint was made that there was disturbance at the front of the building.
Which he said was why our accreditation status had changed. Again, scrumming politicians is part of our job as media and an essential tool for holding politicians accountable. As soon as we arrived at the conference center on Friday morning, a nervous and agitated female security officer tried to delay our entry by physically obstructing us and awkwardly asking questions about our media accreditation.
Ça va bien?
Oui. She also whispered something to a UN security.
Sorry, I just want to check, is there any problem? Because the woman at the entrance, she came to us and she was like really, like, I don't know, agitated, and she let us enter and she came to see you afterwards, and you, the security woman with the curly hair.
No.
Yeah, she called you when we enter. I just want to know, is there any problem?
No, not at all.
After we arrived at the conference center for the media scrum with Guilbeault, one of the minister's staffers began moving the press conference banner and table into a room marked staff only. Guilbeault's secretary then told me that the press conference was postponed until the afternoon without any further details.
You know, you work for the United Nations? No. Or avec Gilbo. The press conference is supposed to take place here.
On n'a pas de press conference ce matin.
Oui, il y a un scrum.
Non, pas ce matin.
J'ai reçu l'invitation.
Oui, c'est plus tard cet après-midi parce que toute l'avant-midi a été décalée.
Décalée par quoi?
Par un événement privé avec le ministre. J'ai pas encore de localisation pour la conférence de presse, mais je peux vous tenir au courant. J'ai juste pas cette information-là sur moi encore.
OK. Votre nom? Caitlin. Caitlin? Oui. Caitlin, mais vous n'avez pas une carte ou comment que je peux faire pour vous rejoindre?
Je vais être ici, je vais sortir pour vous dire.
What she told us was a completely different information that what she mentioned to other media. For them, it was the same hour, different level.
Ça va être au 4e étage.
Ils l'ont changé.
Au 4e étage, dans Open Space, ils vont mettre une bannière dans le fond, comme c'est pas une salle.
À 11h30?
11h15.
11h15. I'm going there.
They probably didn't expect us to follow the other media outlets who needed to drag the heavy equipment to the elevator. At the new location, news media received a private message from Gilbo's secretary telling them to come back to the original location.
She texted me, hey, it's going to be here in front of the painting finally first floor. So we gotta go back down. Gotta go back down.
Are you kidding?
Of course, we were not informed of this, but we followed again. You cannot trick us with this kind of tactic. I then asked Gilbo if he and the UN believe in press freedom since they did so much to get rid of us.
Mr. Gilbo, I just want to clarify something. Ever since myself and Ezra Levin asked you a question earlier this week outside of the summit, our team had our media accreditation removed until we issue a legal demand letter in response. Today, for us to get inside this conference, I was lied about this conference to be postponed and to be changed, and nobody had get back to me. It was hard to get here. So how come the United Nations and yourself are not for press freedom? Our question is too hard?
I think I heard your colleague, Mr. Levan, thank the United Nations the other day in the press conference for taking his question. Obviously, Canada does not issue accreditation for media or for participating. This is a United Nations forum, but your colleague thanked the United Nations the other day.
Yeah, but how come your media relation actually lied to me and actually tell me that that was not happening anymore and that was postponed for this afternoon?
I have worked with my colleague for 4 years, and she's never lied. So I'm sorry, but I profoundly disagree with the characterization of your question.
You can see how they operate to cancel and stifle the voice of independent media. If you wish to support our hard work, legal fees, and travel expenses, please consider contributing what you can at nogreenreset.com, and don't forget to sign up.
Showing us exactly what shameful, spineless leadership looks like.
Any idea what you're doing? Order. I'm going to ask the honourable member from Lethbridge if she has problems with the chair, that she should challenge the chair in a way. But as she knows, as the honourable member from Lethbridge knows, that by challenging the chair is against the rules of this House. I'll ask the honourable member to please to ask her to withdraw her remarks.
The chair is acting in a disgraceful manner.
I'm going to ask you, will you... Ms. Harder, I have to name you for disregarding the authority of the chair. Pursuant to authority granted to me by Standing Order 11, I order you to withdraw from the House and from any participation by video conference for the remainder of this day's sitting. Now back to the issue at hand. Mrs. Thomas, my apologies. Now back to the original point. I'm going to ask the Prime Minister to please, as I'd asked the Leader of the Opposition, you can start from again and to make sure that he does, to start his question, and to reframe it in a way that does not call into the character of an individual member of Parliament. The Honourable Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron, right here, Question Period Canada. So you saw when Rachel Thomas and Pierre Poilievre got kicked out of the House of Commons on Tuesday. Well, Rachel Thomas is coming back. This lady is on fire and she has reasons to be. Like, if you listen to this whole piece, it's super interesting, a little slow, but my goodness, guys. Rachel Thomas has an argument to make, and I think Greg Fergus, the House Speaker, Mr. Speaker, who won't sit down and be quiet, has a lot to deal with here. Like, let's check out the video. Here it goes. Rachel Thomas, woman on fire. She's a cowgirl from Alberta. Giddy up.
Here. Interesting. And I will just point out that if we flip through them on this page here, you can see my words are kindly highlighted for you. Wow. Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of privilege today regarding a significant discrepancy between what was published in the Blues and what was published in Hansard of yesterday. The question of privilege that I raise also has to do with how I was treated by the Speaker of this House and how I was further portrayed publicly. The discrepancy between the Blues and what was published in the Hansard is the omission of two words. Two very important documented words. An exchange between the Speaker and me during question period yesterday. The Blues recorded the following statement by the Speaker. I quote directly. If the Honourable Member for Lethbridge has problems with the Chair, she should challenge the Chair in a respectful way. But as the Honourable Member knows, challenging the Chair is against the rules of this House. I ask the Honourable Member to please withdraw her remarks. To which I replied, and rose in my space, to say this, quote, Mr. Speaker, I stated that the Chair is acting in a disgraceful manner. I withdraw. In the Hansard recording, two words are missing. The words, I withdraw. Wow. That said, it should be noted that it is reported in Hansard that at least one member did point out to the Speaker that these words, in fact, were spoken. It says under the heading, an honourable other member, it says the following, quote, she withdrew it. In the audio recording, many other members were heard drawing attention to this fact, asking for the Speaker to do the same. These words, Mr. Speaker, are significant because they demonstrate that I complied with the Speaker, your request to withdraw. It demonstrates that my withdrawal was not conditional, but rather it was proper and textbook. Therefore, it ought to have been accepted. Yet, I was kicked out of this place for the remainder of the day, as if I hadn't withdrawn those words, or to put it another way, as if Hansard recording of the event was accurate and true, when in fact, Mr. Speaker, we know it is not. If you were to check the audio recording, it clearly picked up the two words that are also recorded in the Blues. It is worth noting that in Chapter 24 of Bosch and Gagnon, it states, quote, the chamber is equipped with cameras operated from a control room, invisible from the floor of the House. The recording of the proceedings is governed by guidelines intended to preserve the concept of the electronic Hansard, as adopted by the House. The two words, Mr. Speaker, that were edited out of the Hansard essentially rewrote history, making the actions and procedure followed by the Speaker, you, appear proper and mine improper. As you know, I was removed from the chamber for the remainder of the day, and I was prohibited from being able to participate in debate or vote on behalf of the constituents who have sent me here. Therefore, the constituents of Lethbridge were robbed of having a presence and a voice in the House of Commons, their democratic right. It was especially egregious given the fact that there was a scheduled vote immediately following question period that day. If you go to the House of Commons site, the blues, unfortunately, are no longer available. Interesting. Which makes a person curious as to why. If you attempt to access the blues today, you will get this message, quote, "Blues are available while the House is in session until the Hansard is published." The blues are taken down. Luckily, though, Mr. Speaker, for you, I kept a copy of those blues that were sent to me yesterday at the end of the day, and I have them available to submit to you here.
Interesting.
And I will just point out that if we flip through them, on this page here, you can see my words are kindly highlighted for you.
Wow. Obstruction.
Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, we are fortunate to also have access to the audio recording, which still exists and does not lie.
It's real funny, isn't it?
She is
hilarious.
At pages 1228 to 1229 of the third edition of House of Commons Procedure and Practice, it states, quote, "The unedited in extenso transcripts of the debates at one time produced on blue paper continue to be known as the blues. Parliamentary publications staff send to each member who speaks in the House the transcription of the member's intervention. The blues are also published on the House of Commons internal website. The availability of the blues on the House of Commons internal website permits members and their authorized delegates to use the webpage or email to submit suggested changes for parliamentary publications editorial staff to consider. Members may suggest corrections to errors and minor alterations to the transcription, but may not make material changes to the meaning of what was said in the House." I'm going to read that part again because it's really important. They may not make material changes to the meaning of what was said in the House. So it's interesting then that the blues said one thing, but Hansard said another, and I did not ask for those changes to be made. The third edition of the House of Commons Procedure goes on to say this: "It is a long-standing practice of the House that editors of the debates may exercise judgment as to whether or not changes suggested by members constitute the correction of an error or a minor alteration. The editors may likewise alter a sentence to render it more readable, but may not go so far as to change its meaning. Editors must ensure that the debates are a faithful reflection of what was said. Any changes made, whether by the members or editors, are for the sole purpose of improving the readability of the text, given the difference between the spoken and written word." End quote. Clearly, Mr. Speaker, I did not suggest any changes to the officials with regard to Hansard. Bosch and Gagnon state that the editors can make alterations but cannot make changes that go so far as to change the meaning of what was said. In the case I raised today, the significant difference in meaning without these two words, "I withdraw," being published in Hansard obviously is very significant. On page 1229, it goes on to say, "When a question arises in the House as to the accuracy of the record, it is the responsibility of the Speaker to look into the matter. In this case, the edit, otherwise known as the deletion of two very significant words, is far more noteworthy than simply improving the readability of a sentence. I believe you'll agree. The justification used by the Speaker to admonish and remove me from the chamber does not match the evidence presented in the blues and by the audio recording that you may also access. The Speaker's actions do, however, fit very nicely with the altered text published in the Hansard. On page 82 of Bosch and Gagnon, it describes a list of items to be considered a contempt, and on that list is, quote, falsifying or altering any papers belonging to the House, end quote. At page 248 of Joseph Magnon's Parliamentary Privilege in Canada, second edition, it states, quote, "The House of Commons of Canada remains prepared to entertain legitimate questions of privilege where false or perverted reports of debates or proceedings are published." End quote. While this passage refers to inaccurate media reports of what was published in Hansard, it is no less offensive, and in fact perhaps more offensive, that this happened right here in the House of Commons. At pages 81 to 83 of Bosch Gagnon, it states, and I quote, "Throughout the Commonwealth, most procedural authorities hold that contempts, as opposed to privileges, cannot be enumerated or categorized. Speaker Sauvé explained in a 1980 ruling, while our privileges are defined, contempt of the House has no limits. When new ways are found to interfere with our proceedings, so too will the House, in appropriate cases, be able to find that a contempt of the House has occurred. Just as it is not possible to categorize or to delineate every incident which may fall under the definition of contempt, it is also difficult to categorize the severity of contempt. Contempts may vary greatly in their gravity. Matters ranging from minor breaches of decorum to grave attacks against the authority of Parliament may be considered as contempts." End quote. Mr. Speaker, it cannot be debated or disputed that someone deliberately removed 2 words from the blues, and that these 2 words have great significance. It cannot be debated or disputed that it therefore changed the meaning of the events yesterday and the way that they would be interpreted, thus resulting in an inaccurate negative reflection of me, which was then broadcasted to my constituents and to all people across Canada. Furthermore, this inaccurate account of events resulted in my wrongful dismissal from this place by you, thus robbing me of the right to represent the constituents of Lethbridge here in the House of Commons and to cast a vote on their behalf, again robbing them of their democratic right. Which leads to another aspect of privilege, and that is improper reflections upon a member. On October 20th, 1966, the member for Edmonton Strathcona rose on a question of privilege that came out of an article in Le Droit of October 14th by Marcel Pépin. He argued that the article imputed an improper motive to him and was a gross distortion of the facts of something that occurred in the House. The Speaker ruled the matter to be a prima facie question of privilege on October 24th, 1966. In my case, it is the Hansard that has recorded a gross distortion of the facts, an act that can be substantiated by the blues and the audio recordings of the procedures I referred to from yesterday, April 30th. I will give another example. On March 22nd, 1983, Speaker Sauvé ruled on a question of privilege relating to false and libelous accusations against the member for Lincoln that had been published in the Montreal Gazette. The Speaker felt that a reflection upon the reputation of an honourable member is a matter of great concern to all members of the House. And the Speaker said at that time, quote, "It places the entire institution under a cloud, as it suggests that among the members of the House there are some who are unworthy to sit there. An allegation of criminal or other dishonourable conduct inevitably affects the member's ability to function effectively while the matter remains unresolved." End quote. Mr. Speaker, the matter I am addressing today is grave in nature and calls for your utmost attention. In summary, the matter I am bringing to your attention today has 3 components. 1, the Speaker's ruling to expel me from the House. 2, the improper alteration of the Hansard. And 3, the inaccurate reporting as to the role that I played here in this place. Mr. Speaker, if you rule this matter to be a prima facie question of privilege, I am prepared to move the appropriate motion today.
I thank the honourable member. I thank the honourable member from Lethbridge for raising this matter of question of privilege. I do encourage her, please, to share all the information that she would like to have the speakership to evaluate, and certainly we will take this with extreme importance. I see that the honourable member from from Burnaby, New Westminster Burnaby, is rising on the same question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is related to the question that I raised last night, just prior to adjournment. You'll recall the ruling from former Speaker, the member from Regina Capel, who is now the Conservative House Leader, dating back to September 24th, 2014. And I'll read it for the record again. Another of our time-honored traditions is that of respect for the office of Speaker. And our procedural Bible, O'Brien and Bosca, page 313, states that reflections on the character or actions of the Speaker, an allegation of bias, for example, could be taken by the House as breaches of privilege and punished accordingly. And the Speaker at the time, the member for Regina Capel, the current Conservative House Leader, said, continued by saying, I wish to conclude with an appeal to members on all sides. Needless to say, the kind of unsavory language or expression that we heard yesterday does little to assist the chair in managing question period proceedings. And I urge all members to be judicious in the expressions that they choose to use. Now, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, yesterday, I raised the issue of the tweet that was put out by the member from Lethbridge, who said the following: how did partisan hack, referring to the Speaker, respond? This is inappropriate, a very clear contravention of all of...
I thank the honourable member and the opposition house, opposition whip. The honourable member is clearly rising not on the issue that was raised by the member of Lethbridge, but on a point of order that he is raising.
You recognized him, and he asked to speak on the same question. It even says it up on the screen.
That was, I think that was an... If we can hold on for a second. So I think this is clearly an error which I made by presuming that the member was rising on the question of privilege that was raised, the serious question of privilege that was raised by the member from Lethbridge. I'm going to go back to the member of New Westminster Burnaby if there's another member who would like to comment on the question of privilege first. Sorry, so that's the member from Saanich Gulf Islands who wants to rise to comment on the question of privilege. And then I will go to the new question of order afterwards.
So what do you think, gang? Is Fergus in big trouble? Should he start to just sit down and be quiet? It sounds like a good idea to me. It would make the flow of the question periods a lot smoother if he would do his job the way it should be done. That reminds me to mention, you should come and join one of our live shows. We cover the question period broadcast daily. It's fun. We've got a great chat room. We're doing some other videos and stuff. Check those out. So like, subscribe, share, comment, all that stuff. Get notified for the live shows. That's the bottom line. We see this stuff live all the time, and it's fun. We've got a great chat room, like I mentioned. It's such a great group. You'd have to come and see. Check it out. That's it. Aaron, Question Period Canada, thank you very much for watching this video. Good luck to Rachel Thomas and good luck to Greg Fergus. See you later, buddy. Anyhow, catch the next video. Thanks for watching this one. Have something healthy to eat today. Try to stay warm. Summer's coming. All right.